Number 10. Vanisher. An old school villain who also almost single-handedly defeated the X-Men back in the day. Almost. So close. Well, actually he kind of did defeat the X-Men team, but fortunately Professor X butt in to save the day. And he was only able to defeat Vanisher by wiping his mind and making him forget who he was and what he was capable of, which I think goes to show just how powerful of a villain he is. He was the first teleporter the team really encountered, proving just how crazy powerful teleporters are. Vanisher is also considered to be a super fast teleporter, and his power limits thus far have been pretty much undefined, even when he did resurface years later. I would consider him to be at a higher level though, just based on what I've seen thus far. He also was able to teleport himself safely just instinctually, even when teleporting to a place he's never seen or been to before, avoiding teleporting partially or fully into any solid objects, which of course could kill him, and which is like a great danger if you're a teleporter. You just teleport somewhere and now part of you's in a car and you're like, well, I guess I'm dead now. That's it. Number 9. Living Diamond. Okay, so someone I also think we need to talk about who needs some kind of redemption in the comics is Jack Winters, aka Jack O'Diamonds, or Living Diamond. He was one of the first X-Men villains whom Professor X saved Scott Summers from, thereby recruiting him to his X-Men team. Living Diamond's mutant power was believed to be radiation resistance, but he was also shown to be able to teleport short distances, had telepathy, and had a diamond form. Does that sound familiar at all? Telepathy with a diamond form. Somehow Living Diamond was way too easily defeated by a vibration beam which shattered him. I know Living Diamond is dead now and was undead at one point, but I really feel like considering how OP Emma Frost has become, Living Diamond should also get a second chance to prove just how powerful he in theory should be. I mean, if you got all that, how were you so easily defeated? And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about the unexpected yet powerful villains that we don't usually get to talk about, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Arcade. Arcade is one of those villains who feels super ridiculous with his grandiose plans for Murder World, but in reality when he actually manages to achieve plots like Murder World, he's actually quite scary. I mean, getting a sneak peek into just what a ludicrous and horrifying operation he'd run in Hellions really made me appreciate just how dangerous Arcade can be if he does manage to get enough hostages, that is, to control people into working with him so he can create his Murder World. In Hellions number 9, it's revealed that the trap Mastermind walked the Hellions, and prior to that Mr. Sinister, into was a trap laid by Arcade himself. Gasp, what a reveal. Arcade's plan was to use Sinister's Hellions as leverage to encourage Sinister to work for him. Sinister didn't really seem to actually care about the Hellions, and he basically just agreed outright, although Arcade still chose to forcefully remove some of his teeth for fun before putting him to work. He wanted Sinister to make clones for him for Murder World, and had his plan worked, it would have been a real horror show. However, Sinister made a counteroffer to Mastermind, and instead the two double-crossed Arcade. Still, that whole like 3-issue arc made me believe in the power of Arcade. Like, if he has the right allies, he could be really crazy. I'm here for like some sort of plot where Arcade tries to just turn the world into Murder World or something. If that hasn't happened yet, someone write that for me, please. Maybe I should write that down. Maybe I should write that. I don't know. Marvel, call me. I got ideas apparently. Number 7. The Blob. The Blob is a villain that we don't often get to talk about on these supervillain lists. He tends to fall by the wayside, but truly he's pretty unstoppable. And when he puts his mind to something, or when he puts his body to something, he's a terribly tough villain to defeat or even move. The Blob was one of the first villains to appear in the original X-Men series, and when he did, he gave the team of youngsters a really tough time. He also attacked them with a circus. The Blob actually didn't start out as a villain, but became one due to the influence of Professor X and the X-Men themselves. Also just thinking back and like the amount of times that the X-Men have fought circuses or been trapped in circuses, or that happens a lot. That's like a recurring theme. Initially, the X-Men attempted to recruit the Blob, but after the Blob refused to accept their offer, he managed to escape before Xavier could wipe his mind of their identities. This caused problems later on down the road, but really it was how the X-Men treated him after he refused to join, and kind of his own self-esteem, and then later his overcompensating sense of superiority that turned him into a villain. I wonder if the Blob actually could have been an ally if this whole scenario had just gone a little bit differently. The Blob is super strong, durable, and virtually immovable thanks to his ability to manipulate gravitational mass. which is pretty powerful. He also later gained a secondary mutation which gave him a liquid form, but he hasn't really exhibited a ton of control with his secondary power set. But he also has liquid form. That's on the resume of powers now. Number 6. Red Death. Also known as Kandra, Red Death currently has a very Scarlet Witch looking vibe going on, and I gotta say, I'm feeling it. And just like Scarlet Witch, she is not someone who you should underestimate. Kandra is part of the Externals, and while she isn't one of the most memorable of that mutant villain team, she's still someone who is super powerful. Technically, just being an External comes with a pretty big dose of power. The Externals, not to be confused with Marvel's Eternals, a different team entirely, are a group of immortal mutants basically. They have had various roles throughout history. One more prominent one that folks might remember Kandra from is her role as Benefactress, when we learned of her history with Gambit and the Thieves and Assassins Guilds of New Orleans during Gambit's miniseries. In fact, that was actually where Kandra first was introduced in the comics, making her initial appearance in Gambit issue number 1 from the 1993 miniseries. Although the way they approach that introduction, you wouldn't necessarily maybe know that that was her first appearance, because she kind of shows up like, hey, you know me, I'm Kandra. And I'm like, do we know you? Who are you? But it's alright, she's pretty powerful. Number 5. Moira X. Moira was at one point powerful enough to have almost successfully wiped out all mutants. If it weren't for Mystique and Destiny, she would have succeeded. Even though she claimed during that past life that she only intended to create a cure to offer it to those who wanted it, Destiny knew that any mutant cure would essentially become weaponized and then forced on mutants, regardless of their own wants and desires. For those who haven't been reading along recently with the events of the current X-Men line of comics, it was revealed that Moira herself was actually a mutant whose powers were basically reincarnation in her own form. Basically, she dies and then she comes back to life as like a baby and lives her life again. But when Moira dies, she ends up being reborn as herself, but with all the memories of that past life. As such, Moira wasn't just a dangerous potential villain for the X-Men, but kind of the whole of 616, which also seems to be tied to Moira's current life, which I believe is her 10th life. Pretty crazy stuff. Moira is no longer a mutant after being cured in the 2021 Inferno series when Mystique shot her with a gun of Forge's design, which basically turns mutants into humans. But she still is a dangerous woman with a lot of information, and it was heavily implied that the creation of Krakoa was kind of all about eventually ridding the world of mutants over time, with Krakoa being like their last hurrah in terms of Moira's plan. Time will tell if Moira becomes more villainous, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did, just based on where she was heading in this story. And when or if that does happen, you better watch out. Danger is the Danger Room. The Danger Room is a villain who surfaced because they were basically being mistreated by Professor X, who had decided to ignore the fact that the training room had become sentient and was itself a technologically based mutant. Eventually, Danger decided, enough of this shit. It's time to get some sweet, sweet revenge. The crazy thing about Danger is although we don't think of her too much, she really would be a pretty strong opponent to the X-Men considering she trained them, and as such would know their strengths and weaknesses. In fact, I think that even is mentioned in the comics at one point. She was also considered to be an extinction level threat that caused Steve Rogers great worry in Heroic Age X-Men, which is kind of like a glimpse into his like tactical commentary diary. So if you wanted to read that, it exists. So despite not thinking about Danger too much, we all probably should in case she ever decides to, you know, go the villain route again. Destroy everyone. Because she could probably do that. Extinction level, friends. Number 3, Mystique. Mystique is someone who isn't particularly or at least outwardly powerful when it comes to what she's capable of or her power set, and for this reason, many people have taken to underestimating her abilities. Here's why we'd advise against that. Inferno, issue number 4. In the newest Inferno series, it's revealed that while Mystique tried to play by Krakoa's rules, when she learned she wasn't going to get what she wanted from Magneto and Professor X, no matter what she did in the name of the Mutant Nation, she decided to take matters into her own hands, as Mystique so often does. Disguising herself as many different people, she was able to easily ensure that Destiny was resurrected, against the wishes of the heads of the Quiet Council. She also put into motion plans to make sure that Destiny would garner a spot on the Quiet Council, and then she almost was successful in enacting revenge on Moira X for keeping her love, Destiny, from her. Mystique here proves that not only is her power set OP, but really that her mind and sense of cunning is what makes her so dangerous, and definitely not someone to be underestimated. Number 2. Destiny. Destiny has to be one of the most underestimated villains in recent years in comics. We have seen her resurface as a considerably dangerous villain in the current X books, and I'm personally loving it. Destiny was dead for quite a few years and actually got to mostly stay dead for much of them. Her mutant power allows her to see potential futures. She can see things that might come to pass, and it seems as though the more likely the future becomes, the clearer her vision of it is. She can also see more immediate futures when in the middle of a conflict. It was because of this power and Moira's personal grudge against and fear of Destiny that she remained unresurrected. But something you really shouldn't underestimate when it comes to Destiny is the power of love. Mystique was already told by Destiny before her death that if there came a time when mutants could be resurrected and they refused to bring her back, that Mystique should basically burn this new world to the ground. And Mystique's love of Destiny gave her the motivation to basically bring Krakoa to its knees with her machinations to not only return Destiny but also put her in a position of power. Precogs and love are a powerful mix. Number 1. Madelyne Pryor. Of course, I have to include the Goblin Queen. Madelyne Pryor is a woman who seems to easily be forgotten and shelved, which is surprising considering how great of a threat she posed in the original Inferno event. Currently in the comics, Madelyne Pryor is making a comeback, returning at the end of the Hellion series after being killed as part of the comic's first arc. The Madelyne Pryor that was killed was definitely feeling pretty evil and threatened to destroy the entire Hellions team before they even started. The returning Madelyne, who has been resurrected by the Five, is at least putting on appearances that she's more level-headed, but in reality it seems the dark side of her still bubbles just beneath. Madelyne Pryor has threatened the entire world with her dark rituals and demon pacts before, and she's a clone of Jean, so although she often gets forgotten and downplayed, she really shouldn't be considering just how dangerous and powerful she is, because Jean is also that and Maddie is also that too. She has the potential at least. Often people try to downplay Maddie because she's a Sinister created clone, but that feels very unfair to me. She's also got like a spark of the Phoenix Force in her, so should that count for something? I think so. Number 10. Deadpool. Deadpool has gone through phases where he was fully cured of his power set and even pretty once more in the comics, like back during Daniel Way's Deadpool run, looking completely normal but without his healing factor. But the most startling shift when it comes to Deadpool's appearance has to be between his on-screen adaptations. That's right, we're talking about the comparison between Deadpool's cinematic debut in the X-Men Origins Wolverine film and his own self-titled film franchise. Although oddly enough, both roles feature him played by Ryan Reynolds. The two adaptations could not be more different. Thankfully in Deadpool 2, Wade manages to fix Cable's temporal dial. Using this device to time travel, Wade is not only able to save Vanessa, who initially died at the beginning of that film, but is also able to clean up the timelines by killing the previous version of himself, who is also known as Weapon 11. It should also be noted that in X-Men Origins Wolverine, Deadpool appeared fully as a villain, as opposed to the lovable mess of an anti-hero we've come to know him as within his own film franchise. Number 9. Raquel. Raquel. I never know how to say this name, but I'm pretty sure it's like Raquel. How do you say Skrull names? That's the question. For some reason, probably because she had been gone so long, Raquel, aka the Skrull Empress, aka Emperor Doric VIII / Hulkling / Teddy Altman's grandmother, was completely unrecognized when she returned. Raquel was revealed to be alive and well, and also sleuthing it up as she impersonated Tenalth the Pursuer, an elite member of the Kree forces. And apparently Raquel had been impersonating Tenalth so long she had in essence created her persona and basically was her. Raquel had actually been plotting and planning in secret, putting in place all the pieces to bring together the Kree and Skrull Empire, uniting them in an alliance in order to ensure her grandson was the one to rule over the now allied empire, as we saw in Empire. That's the name of the event, so not to be redundant. It was an empire, but it's spelled Empire with a Y because it's a whole other thing. And yet when she was revealed in that event to be the one revealed as the Skrull pretending to be Tenalth, many Marvel fans actually needed to crack open their comic history books and review just who exactly she was, with many people mistaking her for Veranke, the Skrull Queen. But yes, this is Raquel. She was believed to have died when the Skrull homeworld perished along with her daughter Princess Enel, as their world was devoured by Galactus. She made her first appearance appearance in the Fantastic Four original series in issue 206 and was believed to have perished in issue 257. But she didn't, she was still alive, and then she came back years later and everyone went, who is that? What? Veronki? What? Not Veronki, two different people. Number 8, Kraven the Hunter. You might think you recognize Kraven, but do you really? After all, the current Kraven that you've seen turning up in the current Beyond storyline of the Amazing Spider-Man series is actually none other than Kraven's last son. Well, his last clone son, anyway. This clone of Kraven was given the name of Last Son after he hunted down all his other brothers, his other clone brothers, who had also been trained by Sergei Kravenov, the Kraven himself. As such, this clone of Kraven was named his true heir, and since then has also taken up the mantle of Kraven the Hunter. So while he may look like Kraven, albeit a younger version of him, this Kraven the Hunter is not actually the original. So I guess this is a character that you would recognize, but in so doing you'd be wrong, which means I guess you didn't really recognize him then, did you? This version of Kraven made his first appearance in the current run of The Amazing Spider-Man, which started in 2018, first appearing back in issue 16 as the Last Son. Number 7, Xemnu. Xemnu made his first appearance in Journey into Mystery in issue number 62. We learned that Xemnu was actually a prisoner and a criminal who was retrieved and accidentally revived by a human and electrician named Joe Harper. Xemnu would go on to become known as Xemnu the Living Hulk, and would also prove to be a powerful cosmic, psionic, and all-around bizarre enemy to the Hulk and the Hulk family in time. Initially, he clashed with the original superhero powerhouse team known as the Defenders. Xemnu in his first appearance has brownish or reddish fur, but currently has reappeared in the comics with white fur, making him look kind of like a space yeti. You may not recognize him because you forgot him, or because he's just so weird, or it could be just because of this change when it comes to, you know, his overall fur color. But yeah, he's got different, I guess he dyed his fur? I don't know. What happened there? Number 6, Norman Osborn. Well, you might currently recognize Norman Osborn in terms of his appearance. When it comes to his actions and his alignment, you might not. And in modern comics, Norman has also gone through a couple dramatic redesigns and makeovers in recent history. At one point, Norman gets plastic surgery to completely change his facial appearance, reinventing himself as Mason Banks and becoming the head of Alchemax. There's even an unmasked point where we were all kind of like, wait, who's that? And then he's like, I changed my face, but it's me, Norman Osborn, aka also Mason Banks. He also has been the head of Hammer and his own Dark Avengers, and for a time posed as their version of Iron Man, tarnishing the mantle of Iron Patriot, and more recently, a depowered Norman bonded with the Carnage symbiote, allowing himself to use the Goblin Serum once more, but ultimately being driven insane by that whole experience and believing himself to actually be prime Carnage host and serial killer Cletus Cassidy. Now sane again, however, and seemingly purified by the Sin Eater, currently in the comics, Norman is on a path of redemption, having gained a new lease on life and being cured of his usual villainous intentions. Or so it would seem. I never trust Norman, but that's what's up currently. Number 5, Galactus. One villain who recently got a very mummy-inspired looking makeover was Galactus during his time in Thor's latest series as written by Donny Cates. Here in the first arc of the 2020 Thor series, referred to as Volume 6 overall of Thor, Thor takes on the immensely powerful cosmic entity known as the Black Winter. Because the Black Winter is so powerful, Thor is forced to team up with Galactus to defeat it. Unfortunately, he also learns that Galactus is actually kind of a herald for the Black Winter. FYI, that is just how powerful of a force the Black Winter is. He has Galactus as a herald. After devouring 5 planets to bolster his own power, Galactus has this power stripped from him by Thor upon this revelation. Thor leaves Galactus drained of the power cosmic, wrinkled, and de-armored, even taking Galactus's helmet as a trophy, using it as the entrance to his throne room. So while you might have recognized him previously, Galactus then got super upgraded and now is very mummified and also very dead. Oof. Number 4, Onslaught. Onslaught initially was a villain with a mysterious background. Despite the fact the powerful villain looked a ton like Magneto and seemed to pack a psionic powerhouse of abilities that echoed an evil Professor X, the character's true identity as really both of those mutants wouldn't be confirmed till after his initial appearance. When Onslaught appeared again, it was in a similar vein, and while the symbol of Onslaught might be similar, this time around when it came to the character's identity, they were even less recognizable, as it was explained that Basically, all the mutants of Krakoa were, in a way, Onslaught, and that Onslaught was able to exist through their constant resurrections. So while you might recognize the look of Onslaught when they returned, their true identity was even more of a mystery than the first time around. And their final form that we saw during X-Men The Onslaught Revelation was pretty wild as well, getting a bit of an update to match even the current character designs of what an amalgamated Charles and Eric would look like currently. I like that that version of Onslaught has like the black suit now, the tight black suit that Charles wears. It's a look. Number 3, One Below All. I think one of the biggest revelations of modern comics was learning that even a being as good as the One Above All, who is basically considered to be like Marvel God, has a dark side. The One Below All ended up being a major villain in the Immortal Hulk series, and we later learned that their power actually came from one of the most divine and good beings in the Marvel universe, the One Above All. The One Below All is like the Hulk for the One Above All. In other words, their darker and much more destructive other half. So while you might know the One Above All and you might know the One Below All, I bet you'd be surprised to learn that they were actually directly connected to one another. They can't exist without the other, especially given how different in appearance and alignment they both are. But this revelation was also super powerful and fitting for a series that was really all about forgiving and reconciling the darker side of the Hulk, the Hulks, and ultimately of humanity and our own individual selves. After all, we all have like a little bit of a Hulk side to us. Number 2, Killmonger. If you go on far enough back, Eric Killmonger easily becomes one of Marvel's villains you would not soon recognize. And that goes both ways. Whether we're talking about more recent fans looking back in comic history to his first appearance in Jungle Action, volume number 2, or whether we're talking about his initial fans looking at his modern MCU adaptation and comic redesign, which obviously takes inspiration from the MCU version of Eric. Killmonger made his first appearance in the second volume of Jungle Action from the 1970s in issue number 6, and even from that front cover, he just looks like really different. Here, Eric does not sport any self-created bodily scars marking his kills, but instead comes with a lot of spiky accessories, including what appears to be a spike belt, which he uses as a weapon to fight against his foe and his rival, Black Panther. All the spikes. Now he's got scars, but back then he had spikes. Number 1, the leader. I doubt after all this time if the leader even really recognizes himself, considering what he looks like now. Following the events of Immortal Hulk, the leader is left no longer a supervillain, but just a guy. Throughout the course of the series, we saw the leader only grow more evil and more powerful, it seemed. He was eventually basically influenced or possessed by the One Below All, the most powerful of all Hulk-related baddies, and possibly the baddest of the bad just in general. However, after the two beings were separated from one another, Stearns was left as just a man, returned to normal. The Hulk decided to forgive the leader, and he returned back to the Earth with all the other Hulks and Bruce Banner. It's been a long time, but Sam Stearns is no longer the leader, at least not currently in the comics. I mean, he could return to being the leader at some point. Instead, Samuel Stearns is just Samuel Stearns.
Number 10, Nightmare. Nightmare is one of the Fear Lords, who rules over the Nightmare dimension, of the Dream dimension, of the Splinter dimensions, of the Dark dimensions. Nightmare rules over the Nightmare dimension, which is where people go when they have nightmares. Let's just leave it at that. He is a Fear Lord, one of these guys, and he first appeared in Strange Tales 110. Which is also the first appearance of Stephen Strange. So if you thought we were not covering Nightmare, you thought wrong. In the follow-up Doctor Strange story, the world is destroyed, and Doctor Strange goes to seek the help of Eternity, who is the physical embodiment of the Marvel Universe, only to find Nightmare captured Eternity in the Dream dimension and subjected him to horrible dreams. Because Nightmare's powers are fueled by humans, it took a battle between the Ancient One and Eternity to convince Eternity to reform the Earth and human civilization. That's how scary nightmares are! He shows up occasionally, tormenting heroes in their dreams, and leaving his realm to depower him so that heroes can actually defeat him. Usually, it's Doctor Strange doing the hard work inside other people's dreams though. Number 9, Kulan Gath. Kulan Gath was a sorcerer who lived in Earth's Hyborian era, aka the time of Conan the Barbarian. He actually isn't the original Kulan Gath though. Well, he is, and he isn't. See, Kulan had a slave who poisoned him and assumed his identity. When this Kulan Gath set out the training of the then Sorcerer Supreme, Mekri Ra, he was refused. He responded by murdering and consuming the Sorcerer Supreme, gaining his power. As an enemy of Conan, Kulin was eventually beheaded by the barbarian, but not before he had become immortal by putting his essence in a magical amulet. That's a Horcrux! After the amulet had made its way to Manhattan in the modern era, it ended up in the hands of a mugger who donned the amulet, allowing Kulin Gath to possess and transform the body of the mugger. Then, he transformed Manhattan into a replica of the time he came from, manipulated the minds of everyone there, and took control of the minds of the Avengers, X-Men, New Mutants, and Morlocks to hunt down Spider-Man. It took the combined powers of Doctor Strange and the mutant magic to change time so that the mugger was killed by Nimrod instead. You know you're a problem when people just go back in time to take you out. Number 8. Loki. At this point, I'm pretty sure everyone and their mom has heard of the god of mischief, Loki. If not from the MCU, then at least from the actual Norse mythology. So I'm not gonna go into a huge backstory spiel, but do you know how actually powerful Loki is? Obviously he is a god, and the number of benefits that come with that title are, well, he doesn't really need a plan, let's just say that. He is super strong, super durable, super fast, he's got a healing factor, and he lives for a hell of a long time. But more than that, Loki himself is an extremely powerful sorcerer. So powerful in fact that Loki even recently took on the role of Sorcerer Supreme through a little of his trickster ways. Let me tell you, it took Stephen Strange harnessing the full power of the World Tree Yggdrasil, plus the strength of the Sentry, and more prominently the Void, which is capable of destroying Asgard and has even killed Loki in the past, for Doctor Strange to get the mantle back. Needless to say, Loki is an extremely powerful villain for most characters in the Marvel Universe, but as a sorcerer, he is a pain in the backside of our Sorcerer Supreme. Number 7. Baron Mordo. You know that guy who is basically Stephen Strange's sidekick in the first movie? Yeah, that guy. That's Mordo. So Mordo was born in Transylvania, basically as a means of another sorcerer, this dude, gaining power. And when that all went kaput, Mordo was trained in the ways of black magic. At the age of 30, he went to Tibet to find and study with the Ancient One, and it's here that he eventually met our lovely boy Stephen. Mordo didn't really dig Strange though. And when Stephen walked in on Mordo doing some nefarious planning to attack his master, Mordo cast a spell to stop Stephen from warning Baldy. He's the bad guy though, and this is the origin story of Doctor Strange, so you can imagine how it didn't go too well for him. Stephen became the Sorcerer Supreme, and Mordo left, continuing his studies of dark magic on his own time. He has always been a long-time rival to Strange and the Ancient One, causing all kinds of mischievous activity, helping other villains like Dormammu, and joining multiple different mystic teams. As another powerful sorcerer, he has many abilities and spells equal to Doctor Strange, except he's got a fair dose of the old black magic, which is always a problem for bad guys. I'm super excited to see what part he plays in the Multiverse of Madness, especially with that hair. Damn, boy! Number 6. Doctor Doom. He's got arguably the best lines in Marvel Comics. He rules Latveria. His mother sacrificed her soul to the devil to make him a monarch. He's got a huge ego, but not for no reason. I don't think there is a hero that hasn't come into some kind of contact with Doctor Doom, although he is primarily a Fantastic Four villain. His use of magic, though, brings him into interaction with the Sorcerer Supreme so many times. Doctor Doom was introduced to sorcery through his mother, but received a huge power boost when he sacrificed the soul of his former lover, Valeria, to the Hazareth 3, who in return granted him magical armor made of Valeria's skin and flesh. Couldn't be me. With their power and his own sorcery, Doom can create mystical blasts and force fields, invoke entities, cast more powerful spells, reverse other spells, summon demonic hordes, teleport, travel to other dimensions, mystical ensnaring in portals, magically heal himself and others, banish others, time travel, absorb power, manipulate elements, perform telekinesis, nullify others' powers. And I think that's the list. But other than his sorcery, he is a super genius in the vein of Tony Stark, even eventually becoming Iron Man for a while. He's a master martial artist, he is at peak human condition, he's got great connections, he's super charismatic, and just plays the piano like a pro. His biggest weakness is that damn ego. But there was a point in time where he was known as God Emperor Doom, when he used the power of the Beyonders to create and rule over Battleworld, making the Sorcerer Supreme his sheriff. Like I said, he kind of has a right to possess such an ego. I mean, just look at him! Number 5. Mephisto. Mephisto has always been somewhat of a background character, jumping up here and again in Marvel Comics, but with no real huge events to his name, although he has been a part of a few. Mephisto is an extremely powerful extra-dimensional demon who very closely resembles the devil, but that may only be because it's the easiest way for him to use people's fears to his advantage. Mephisto's calling card is making bets, but they're never fair wagers. He always seems to get people in the wording of his deals. He'd probably make one hell of a lawyer. Usually Mephisto is asking people to put their souls, or the souls of those they love, on the line. Like with Doctor Doom's mother or Johnny Blaze, or most recently when he and Doctor Strange had a bet that people weren't all that bad in exchange for Doctor Strange's soul. That kind of thing. In his own dimension, the Hell Lord is basically omnipotent, although he can be defeated by someone who is smart enough or powerful enough. As a mystical entity, he's been a long-time foe of the Sorcerer Supreme, and his most recent story, involving a hotel he sprouted up in the middle of Las Vegas, is just so quirky and fun. Number 4, Umar. Umar of the Faltine is an insanely powerful being who is the sister of Dormammu. Umar ended up having a little bow chicka wow wow with Dormammu's disciple Orani, which led to Umar giving birth. The sweet miracle of birth changed Umar, making her incapable of turning back into her Faltine form, depowering her significantly. This kinda drove her crazy and she lashed out at everyone, including her much more powerful brother, who banished her to a pocket dimension of the Dark Dimension. Quite the falling out. She loves her brother though, so when he's defeated by Doctor Strange and she is freed from her banishment, she goes on to try and avenge her brother. When she went to Earth to destroy it, however, she was defeated by another extremely powerful entity. But before we get on to that guy, I just wanted to say a quick thanks for watching from me and us here at Top 10 Nerd. I hope you're enjoying the video. If you are, why not give us a little like and tap that subscribe button? You are the reason we can do what we do. I love you guys. Alright, on to top 3. Number 3, Zom. When the aforementioned Umar invaded Earth and Doctor Strange could not defeat her, he needed some way to put her down. The Ancient One told Doctor Strange about the 20-foot, 18,000-pound interdimensional being Zom. Doctor Strange was like, okay, perfect, I'll just go summon him, which he did, and Zom easily defeated Umar. But now he's free, and no one wants to be put back in the mystical slammer, so he turns on the Doctor. Zom is so powerful that there was absolutely nothing Doctor Strange could do. Even if all the reality warping heroes and all the Avengers combined forces, they would not be able to defeat Zom. It took the power of the Living Tribunal, the literal judge of the multiverse, who had not even been seen in Marvel Comics before this point, to whisk him away. And then the Tribunal scolded Doctor Strange for summoning a being who could literally wipe out the multiverse. He threatened to destroy Earth. It was that intense. Zom has no other goal than to completely annihilate and destroy everything, ever. Zom is one of the most powerful mystical entities in the entire Marvel universe, and the Living Tribunal is the only person who has been shown to stop him. Number 2, Dormammu. Dormammu is one of a race of extra-dimensional energy beings called the Faltine. Him and his sister Umar are both mutants of the species, seeking to consume matter instead of energy, which, along with killing their pops, caused them to be banished. They both traveled to the Dark Dimension and eventually took it over, but we know what happened to their relationship afterwards. Dormammu is the prime enemy of the Vishanti, the gods who give the Sorcerer Supreme his supreme merch, and is stated by Odin to be his equal in power. He is basically immortal and indestructible because of his energy body. He is more powerful than even the greatest sorcerers, including Doctor Strange and the Ancient One, and he can banish anyone from his domain, the Dark Dimension, but usually fights them for a bit of the old sport. He also has super strength, astral projection, matter transmutation, interdimensional teleportation, flight, can change his appearance and size. He can control the elements, time travel, and project and absorb energy. He's also immortal and has a regenerative healing factor. Dormammu first appeared in Strange Tales number 126 when he threatened the Ancient One with an invasion. The old guy sent Doctor Strange to the Dark Dimension to face Dormammu. The eventual fight set Mindless Ones loose, causing Dormammu and Strange to team up. Dormammu promised not to invade Earth, but he got all bitter and petty and has been one of Strange's most fearsome enemies since. He's faced almost everyone on this list. Number 1, Shuma-Gorath. Shuma-Gorath is one of the greatest of the leaders of the Old Ones, also known as the Many-Angled Ones, which are a race of nightmare fuel. Think Lovecraft, so tentacles and madness and all that jazz. It is the ruler of hundreds of dimensions and is said to be older than the universe itself. It has many mystical powers, including the ability to communicate and control others across dimensions, create mystical energy blasts from his eyes and tentacles, and can transmute things on a planetary scale. He can destroy multiple galaxies with his aura pressure, and can destroy realities by using his tentacles to create a ball of energy that he launches at realities. I'm sorry. Does anyone else find the word tentacles funny? Anyone? They first fully premiered in Marvel Premiere Volume 1, Number 10. In the comic, they end up using the mind of the Ancient One, Doctor Strange's mentor, as a portal to the dimension of Earth. Doctor Strange goes into the Ancient One's mind to battle the defenses of Shumagorath and fight his way into its realm, only to realize that the only way to win is to kill the Ancient One. He's forced to do it.
Coming in at number 10, we have the She-Hulk villain Abominatrix, who surprisingly enough doesn't actually have a connection with the more well-known villain, the Abomination, despite apparently being a gender-flipped version of him. Born under the name of Florence Sharples, Florence volunteered for a medical study that involved test subjects being exposed to gamma rays. As a result, Florence became a gamma-mutated creature that was constantly in a state of anger, unable to return to her human form as her rage continued to grow. Eventually, she would come into conflict with She-Hulk and nearly destroy Las Vegas during their ensuing fight, showing that the Abominatrix is not to be messed with. Coming in at number 9, we have Bert Horowitz, aka the super genius villain known as Omnibus. Following an incident in which the leader detonated a gamma bomb inside a small town in the middle of Arizona, a local salesman named Bert Horowitz found himself rapidly becoming more intelligent by the minute, a similar mutation to the villain who had detonated the gamma bomb in the first place. In fact, when the leader was believed to be dead for a time, Bert took the name of Omnibus and replaced the leader's position in his massive spy network, becoming a new foe that the Incredible Hulk would have to deal with until the true leader finally returned to take back what was rightfully his. Coming in at number 8, we have the very unfortunately named Jailbait, aka Jesse Harrison, turned into a gamma mutant during the same gamma bomb event in Arizona that also spawned Omnibus. Jesse not only gained the traditional green skin and enhanced strength, but also possessed the ability to generate psionic blasts and force fields, depending on her level of concentration. And while Jesse's story was recently shown to have ended in tragedy during the Immortal Hulk series, for a long time she stood strong as one of the guardians of the leader's Freehold paradise, another green Goliath for the Hulk to have to battle. Coming in at number 7, we have the evil Patchwork, a serial killer that somehow manages to be even more depraved than Carnage and Cletus Kasady combined. Patchwork was one of the very first villains ever faced by Doc Samson, when the Doctor decided to do some solo superheroing and proved to be a worthy opponent. Using the gamma radiation oozing off his body to murder innocent women and make horrific sculptures with them, Patchwork was an incredibly durable and strong foe once he came face to face with a gamma-powered equal, and proved to be a worthy first opponent to be defeated by Doc Samson. Coming in at number 6, we have Tony Masterson, aka Half-Life. Living most of his life as a quiet college professor, Tony's life was forever changed when he accidentally fell victim to a gamma bomb experiment being conducted by S.H.I.E.L.D. The explosion bleached his skin a ghostly green and convinced Tony that he had died and was now a walking corpse. Giving himself the name Half-Life, the villain was a worthy foe for the Hulk after being manipulated by the leader, and had the unique ability to drain the life force of his enemies through touch alone, like some sort of gamma-infused vampire or ghoul. This meant that the Hulk had to be a bit more creative when it came to fighting him, as punching Half-Life would only wind up giving him more power. Coming in at number 5, we have Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, aka the Red Hulk. Now, we did also have this guy on our list about most powerful Gamma heroes, but considering how his story started out, he definitely also counts for the villain list. Following the death of his daughter after years of pursuing the Hulk, Ross was manipulated by MODOK and several other supervillains into becoming the Red Hulk, in case his nemesis should ever return from his exile in outer space. Following the Hulk's return and defeat, the new Red Hulk began causing damage across the globe, even getting into a fight with Thor on the moon and causing an earthquake in San Francisco from the sheer force of him jumping back to Earth. All in all, the Red Hulk definitely caused some major destruction. Coming in at number 4, we have Emil Blonsky, aka Abomination. A Croatian spy during the Cold War undercover on the same military base where Bruce Banner became the Hulk, Blonsky was the victim of a second Gamma experiment when he foolishly activated the reactor on his own. Transformed into a green creature with claws even deadlier than the Hulk, Blonsky took the name Abomination once he realized he could not return to human form, and his days as an incognito spy were over. Stronger and with a healing factor on par with the Hulk, Abomination is a twisted look at what gamma radiation can do to someone who's already a trained killer. Coming in at number 3, we have Maestro, a twisted and evil version of the Hulk from a possible alternate future, giving himself a new name after conquering what remains of America following a nuclear winter in this dark future. This version of the Hulk has become far stronger than his original gamma green form, with years of sucking up deadly radiation only improving his ferocity and his power. When the real Hulk encountered this warlord version of himself, the only way he was able to finally come out on top was by literally warping the Maestro back in time to be killed by the same gamma bomb that created the Hulk back in the 60s. But even since then, this future version of the Hulk still seems to keep finding ways to return and claim dominion over the world that he claims he deserves to rule. Coming in at number 2, we have Samuel Stearns, aka the Leader. Many people throughout the Marvel Universe can claim to be geniuses, but only the Leader has the unbelievably tall skull to seemingly prove it. Born a simple blue-collar American worker until an accident doused him in gamma radiation, Samuel found himself getting the opposite of most other gamma mutates' powers. Instead of becoming incredibly strong, he became incredibly smart, gaining an increased head size as his intellect, ego, and ambition all swelled. No matter how powerful and strong most of the Hulk's enemies may seem, few can compare to the terrifying genius of the Leader when he's fully unleashed, as his plans have nearly destroyed or conquered the world on countless occasions, and have only been able to be stopped by the Hulk and Bruce Banner trying to use his own genius-like intellect. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the most powerful gamma being of all, because he's the source of all of them. That's right, it's the one below all, residing in the very lowest point of reality at the very bottom of the multiverse. The one below all is the ultimate personification of destruction and hate, essentially being the Hulk-esque alter ego of the one above all, the divine creator of the entire Marvel multiverse. The one below all is the source of all gamma radiation, as it uses the energy source to gain access to other worlds across the multiverse, and resurrect gamma-related beings if they die after becoming connected to the one below all. Even with all of the crazy additions to the Hulk's mythology in the past few years, the one below all is perhaps the greatest, most powerful addition of all time. And who knows what the future holds for the creator of Gamma itself.
Coming in at number 10, we have the evil sorcerer Wotan. One of the arch enemies of the classic DC hero Dr. Fate, Wotan is a green-skinned magic wielder that has managed to fight Dr. Fate over the ages by constantly reincarnating themselves into a new body and form after each defeat, seemingly incapable of having their spirit totally destroyed. Originally a woman from the Stone Age who had trained in black magic, and also rumored to be connected to a Viking goddess, Wotan is one of the oldest villains throughout all of DC Comics history, and will likely continue to be a magical thorn in Dr. Fate's side for the rest of time. Coming in at number 9, we have Eclipso, the former Wrath of God. A supernatural agent of chaos with his face permanently in the shade of a constant eclipse, Eclipso claimed to be the one who carried out the biblical flood of Noah's Ark, and that he was replaced in his position as the physical embodiment of God's wrath by the Spectre because Eclipso was simply too violent and angry for the role. Older than almost every other being on Earth, Eclipso has fought many heroes over the years, and even though he no longer possesses the power of a full god, he is still an extremely dangerous magical being, and who knows what he'll try to do next to regain his godly power. Coming in at number 8, we've got Black Adam. Born 5,000 years ago as a slave in the country of Kahndaq, Adam was gifted the powers of all the gods, similarly to how Billy Batson would be several millennia later. However, after freeing himself and the other slaves, Adam wasn't content to lead a life of peace, instead choosing to become the violent leader of Kahndaq and ruling with an iron fist. Horrified at the destruction being caused by his powers, the wizard Shazam within the Rock of Eternity sealed away Black Adam for thousands of years, choosing to wait for a more suitable heir to all of his power. Of course, once Black Adam was unleashed once again by the research of Dr. Sivana, he was dead set on getting back the position of power that he believes Billy Batson has unjustly stolen from him. Coming in at number 7, we have the Enchantress. And to be more specific, we're talking about the Enchantress known as June Moon from the DC universe, and not the Enchantress from Marvel's Thor comics, although honestly, either Enchantress could probably earn a spot on this list. In this case, the Enchantress is a dark magical personality that was awakened within the young artist June Moon, transforming her physically into a magic-wielding sorceress whenever she chooses to call upon its power, or during moments of great emotional turmoil. And while June herself likely doesn't count as a supervillain given that she generally wants what's best for everyone, but the actual Enchantress entity, she's a being of pure destruction and only June's strength of will is capable of holding her back. Coming in at number 6, we have the Marvel entity known as Nightmare. One of the Fear Lords, a group of demons that gain their power from human suffering and misery, Nightmare has been a longtime villain of Doctor Strange and any other Marvel hero that dares to wander into the magical realm of sleep. Capable of bringing any sleeping person's astral form into his Nightmare realm, Nightmare is one of the few Marvel villains that relies almost entirely on mental manipulation and tricks, as he's much weaker if he's ever brought into the physical waking world. Even with this limitation, Nightmare is a ruthless foe, and is always searching for another way to bring everyone in existence into his dark world of fitful slumber. Coming in at number 5, we've got another Marvel demon with the infamous Mephisto. Perhaps best known for being behind the One More Day event that saw Spider-Man's marriage with Mary Jane Parker get wiped from the timeline, Mephisto is one of the closest things that the Marvel Universe has to a Satan character, and uses humanity's belief in a devil to inspire even more fear in his powers. Extremely powerful and considered a Class 2 demon, Mephisto often finds himself in conflict with some of the more magical or even cosmic heroes of this universe, although his preferred method of work is manipulating events from afar. And with Mephisto having recently become a major player in Spider-Man lore again, as the true reasoning behind his obsession with Peter Parker's marriage is slowly being revealed, we definitely haven't seen the last of the Marvel Universe's devil. Coming in at number 4, we have Baron Mordo. A student of the mystical Ancient One for decades before Dr. Stephen Strange even injured his hands, Baron Karl Mordo was long suspected by the Ancient One as having an impure heart, but nevertheless was taught magic as a potential next Sorcerer Supreme. However, Mordo's ambitions for power were too great, and he was banished from the Ancient One's sanctum for contacting the dread entity called Dormammu. With Dr. Stephen Strange being trained in his place as a Sorcerer Supreme, specifically to stop any future plans of Mordo's, the Baron embraced his role as a magical villain and has been a persistent enemy of Strange and his allies ever since. Coming in at number 3, we have the demonic Trigon the Terrible. Hailing from the dimension of Azarath, Trigon is best known as being the evil father of Raven, one of the key members of the Teen Titans. Born from the darkness shed from humanity inside his own dimension, Trigon sought to have a child tethering him to the earthly realm, and thus seduced Raven's mother while in an angelic disguise. With Raven having become a hero determined to use her magic to fight against her father's wishes, Trigon has become one of the largest threats the Teen Titans, or even the rest of the DC universe, have ever faced, and in recent years has been building up a new army from within his hellish dimension. Coming in at number 2, we have the Lord of Dread himself, Dormammu. The true nemesis of Dr. Stephen Strange, Dormammu is literally millions of years old, and born from a realm of pure magic before eventually conquering the vast expanse known as the Dark Dimension, a reality without time, and combined his own magic with that of the entire Dark Realm. With the Baron Mordo acting as his earthly disciple, Dormammu has long wished to conquer Earth and expand his domain, with only the efforts of Doctor Strange having been successful in holding him back so far. With his magic even being powerful enough to alter the spells of Odin the Allfather, Dormammu is one of the most powerful magical beings in the entire Marvel multiverse. But hold that thought though, because finally coming in at our top spot, we have the infamous Victor Von Doom. Now, when you think of Doctor Doom, you might think of his more scientist-esque depictions in the movies, or his many uses of technology in the comics as the leader of Latveria, such as his army of Doombots. However, the true danger of Doctor Doom is in his utilization of both technology and magic together, as the Fantastic Four's nemesis has long been a powerful sorcerer alongside his technical genius and power as the leader of a country. Introduced to the mystical arts by his own mother, Doom has proven to be so adept at magic that he was even briefly considered as a potential Sorcerer Supreme. However, given that he often uses his magic for kinda evil purposes, it's probably for the best if Doctor Doom just remains a doctor for the time being.
Number 10, Crime Lord. He might not be one of the most powerful on this list, but I've been really loving the Doom Patrol series so far. I have to get caught up on season 3 personally, but wow, did that series get me super invested in this team. At one point, one of the enemies they face is former teammate Mento, aka Steve Dayton in the show. In the show, we learned that Steve Dayton and Rita Farr, who some might know in the comics as Elastigirl, used to date. In fact, in the comics, Steve and Rita were even married. Just like in the show where Mento appears to be both ally and misguided enemy to the team, in the comics, Dayton was also a criminal at one point, becoming the villain known as Crime Lord. His plan in the comics involved framing Deathstroke for murder and placing nuclear bombs the world over, threatening pretty much the entire Earth cause nuclear bombs. In the end, he was defeated and would become a hero once more. Mento gets his powers from his Mento helmet, which increases the strength of his otherwise low-level psionic abilities. With his helmet, he becomes both telepathic and telekinetic, can fly, and can even control the minds of others. Number 9, Gorilla Grodd. One of Gorilla Grodd's main powers was his force of mind. He was able to use his mind to manipulate the thoughts and senses of others, and he could also use it to take control of people and bend them to his will, or even take their form for himself. Being that Gorilla Grodd is also quite intelligent, he has also found ways to even influence others into adoring him. Back in the New Earth continuity, Grodd once devised a plan to win the heart of the gorilla lady that he loved by making his body emanate a neomagnetic force that made him instantly liked by those who made his acquaintance, gorilla or human. He succeeded in wooing his lady love, and later would use the same acquired power to influence the people of Central City, almost becoming governor and plotting to use his influence to become the president of the United States thereafter, if he succeeded. Of course, Flash ended up figuring out what was going on and foiled Grodd's plans before they could bear fruit. So no President Grodd for us. Sad. I want to see that plan come to fruition. Unless that's already happened and I somehow missed it, but I don't think so. Number 8, Annihilation. Annihilation is the entity that is believed to be a demonic god. It rules over the Amenthi demon army and is typically attracted to those who are strong enough to defeat it, or defeat its current host, at least. Whoever beats Annihilation must then take its golden helm up for themselves. Wearing the golden helm of Annihilation basically gives you control over the Amenthi army, somewhat, but at the expense of ruling over yourself fully, as it bends you to its will. This is how Annihilation tricked and gained control of Genesis, Apocalypse's wife, who ruled over Arakko and its mutants. She managed to beat Annihilation in battle, only to realize too late that the fight had kind of been a trick. She became the new Annihilation and was forced to merge together the forces of Amenth and of Arakko, becoming the new leader of both groups. Refusing to do so would have meant the Amenthi demons would have been left to run wild, as they would have no guide and no leader, and would then have certainly destroyed the mutants of Arakko otherwise. So Genesis was in a hard place. She was like, I guess I kind of got to do it to save my people, but also then I'm going to kind of lose myself because I'm going to become Annihilation. Dang. Number 7, Brother Blood. Brother Blood is a pretty terrifying villain, to be honest. His mind control comes from accessing his victim's blood, and through getting their blood, there is a whole slew of powers he can exert over you. Brother Blood in the current continuity can use the blood of his enemies to heal, rip open teleportation portals, and even project energy. Oh, and he also gains the powers of those whose blood he has tasted. And of course, once he has your blood, he can also use it to control you, bending you to his will and making you do his bidding. Not only does that mean you're in danger of losing your own free will if you go up against him, but it also means that you have to deal with all of his servants who have already kind of surrendered and are puppeted by him. He also happens to be a weirdly likable guy, so it's pretty easy for him to attract even willing followers who he can then use much more easily as pawns for his own evil plots. And they're all like, yes, we like the blood, the Church of Blood. Number 6, Purple Man. Although Purple Man sometimes can be seen as having a bit of a weakness when it comes to his power set or when it comes to just certain people he comes up against, Kilgrave is still pretty off the charts when it comes to all that he has achieved and is capable of. He can easily influence his opponents to do whatever he wishes simply by suggesting them to do it. However, it's also been implied that his powers can only work when his target can actually audibly hear his command. Now, if this were true, that would make him weaker. But in reality, in the comics anyways, Kilgrave's powers are actually pheromone based, which means he simply has to be in the vicinity for you to become a helpless victim of his. And if you couldn't hear him, you'd probably still do what he wanted you to do. In the Jessica Jones Netflix series, David Tennant played Kilgrave, and that show really showed just how much of a monster and a powerhouse this villain can be. At one point, Dr. Doom even managed to use Kilgrave's power to rule the world. And at another point in time, in another reality, I guess I should say, Purple Man actually does rule the world. And that's what actually comes about creating the 1602 universe, because he tries to get rid of the people that would basically rise up against him, putting them in 1602, and then everything gets wonky there. And Purple Man alone is apparently capable of controlling over 100 people at a time by himself. So yeah, that's a lot. Number 5, Emma Frost. Emma Frost is one of the most powerful mutant telepaths in the Marvel Universe. Actually, hold that. One of the most powerful telepaths, period, in the Marvel Universe, mutant or not. She has given the likes of Professor Charles Xavier a run for his money and has managed to duke it out psionically with mental heavyweights like Jean Grey. The only reason we are ranking her so low for a villain who possesses powerful mind control abilities is because she's really more of a hero these days. But she did start out as a villain in the comics, and it's important to remember that with Emma. In fact, that's a big part of what makes her such an interesting and compelling character, I think, today. Emma can influence a person's thoughts, manipulate them to do what she wants, and even alter their memories. In her days as a villain, she definitely used her powers to make others do her bidding, even compelling her victims to kill at her behest. Emma as a villain is scary. Emma would be more scary as a villain today, too. I kind of want Emma to be a villain again for a little bit. I just feel like she's a great hero, but she's also a great villain. I don't know. She's just great. The end. Number 4, Xemnu. Xemnu is also known as the Living Hulk and is a being that uses hypnosis powers to take control of others' minds. On more than one occasion, he has attempted to use these powers to conquer Earth and bend the minds of its entire populace to his will. In fact, while he's also attempted this feat in the pages of Immortal Hulk, this was also something he tried in his very first appearance. Back then, he was trying to mind control the human race in order to get them to build him a ship to return him home. Doesn't sound like such an evil plan, until you realize the force of the ship that he'd have the Earth build would actually rip it asunder once it took off and destroy it completely, due to the great force needed for it to launch. Number 3, Maxwell Lord. Maxwell Lord's power set has changed over time, but the fact remains that when it comes to taking control or influencing others in the DC universe, he's pretty much one of the best. He has taken control of the minds of some of the most powerful heroes in DC, such as Superman and Martian Manhunter. And because his powers have fluctuated over his history as a character, so have his power levels, with him at one point being able to extend his telepathic reach to manipulate the minds of billions at a time on Earth. pretty crazy stuff. In the DCEU in Wonder Woman 1984, Maxwell Lord was a failed businessman who gained the power to grant others wishes, and through that amassed power for himself, besides with said wish granting also being kinda like a monkey's paw that generally came with some kind of catch or negative aspect. However, in the comics, Maxwell Lord doesn't even need an artifact to control the minds of others, which makes him even more deadly. And even if he didn't have like powers, he's still like super charismatic and persuasive, so he could probably just convince you to do what he wants you to do just by like being all smooth and charming. Number 2, Onslaught. Onslaught is one of the most powerful telepathic and telekinetic minds we've ever seen our Marvel heroes face. At one point, he threatened the existence of most of the superpowered heroic community in Marvel and seemingly killed a lot of them. And that was because he was basically threatening the entire world. Fortunately, they were rescued by young Franklin Richards and his reality warping powers. Onslaught is an entity created out of the combined minds of Professor Charles Xavier and Magneto that was created when Xavier broke Magneto's mind, seemingly wiping it but actually taking part of it into himself. Merging with his own suppressed dark emotions, Onslaught was created. While Onslaught is most powerful in many ways, the entity can also implant ideas in the minds of even the strongest telepaths, encouraging them to do his bidding as he sees fit, though generally he seems to prefer to strong-arm people for the most part when push comes to shove. He has like a lot of like psychic abilities, but I feel like he's also just like telekinetically like, I'll just punch you into outer space. Number 1, Starro the Conqueror. Starro can literally conquer entire worlds and actually has done that before. And on more than one occasion, they have also almost conquered Earth as well. Starro is a giant space starfish who in their first appearance took on the first formation of the Justice League in The Brave and the Bold issue number 28, where they threatened to, you guessed it, conquer the world. While in the Suicide Squad film, Starro the Conqueror was a cruel nickname given to Starro by the Thinker, who is in charge of the experimentation on that imprisoned alien, that poor imprisoned alien. In the comics, it was a name earned by Starro because they had conquered so many worlds already. Starro basically creates lots of smaller starfish babies or spores, which can then latch onto individuals and take over their minds. In the Suicide Squad, this is made even more horrifying, as to be controlled by a Starro baby also means that you are now dead and basically just a husk. But in the comics, possibly even more terrifying still than that prospect is the revelation that Starro doesn't need to get one of their babies on you to control you. They can also do that through infecting your subconscious, or in more recent incarnations, just with their willpower. No babies or spores needed. Although fortunately in the comics, you know, if a baby or a spore attaches to you, doesn't mean you're dead. You can still come back.
Starting at number 10, we have General Zod. This Kryptonian supervillain flaunts the same powers as Superman, but he's also got the know-how of a highly experienced army general, having held the title of Leader of Military Defense for the Science Council on Krypton. General Zod survived the destruction of Krypton and, after being released from the Phantom Zone, became a sworn enemy to Superman. This supervillain is fueled, like many others, by resentment and rage, believing that violence is the only way to make any real change in the world. I put him at the back of our list not to discount his powers, but purely because there are far more powerful beings to come. Number 9, Doomsday. This hyper-regenerative creature was created in a lab and designed to experience death over and over and over again, each time evolving past whatever had killed him the last time. Starting off as a seemingly regular baby, he has grown into a monstrosity that has experienced death so many times that he's become a tormented and, I imagine, exhausted creature that actually holds on to the memories of each experience. So, imagine facing the pain of death almost endlessly for eternity, mostly inflicted by superheroes trying to rid the universe of you. You'd be pretty angry too. Doomsday even faces off against and defeats Superman at one point, so his power is not to be underestimated. But he just can't contend with some of the other godlike powers that other villains on this list possess. So for that reason, he's a bit further back on the list, but once again, not to be discounted. At number 8, we have Hela, the eldest daughter of Odin. Hela is endowed with powers superior even to her younger brothers Loki and Thor. Most notably credited with effortlessly shattering Thor's hammer with one hand, this supervillain easily has the ability to rule not only the world, but the whole cosmos. Hela is basically a god, having a set of abilities that practically make her entirely omnipotent, with super strength, super durability, and immortality as long as Asgard existed, omnipresent, with super speed and super reflexes, and omniscient, with her almost endless knowledge of sword and hammer fighting, hand-to-hand combat, acrobatics, and military strategy. If anyone is capable of not only overpowering any good guys standing in her way, but also outsmarting them, it's Hela. Okay, at number 7 we've got the one and only Thanos. Probably the most widely popular on the list, it's not hard to imagine him taking over and ruling the world for obvious reasons. But I know some of you may be shocked to see him at number 7 and not at number 1, 2, or 3, because despite his undeniable strength and motivation to balance out the population of the universe, he wasn't able to do it alone. As we all know, Thanos' peak power relies on the Infinity Stones, so if he failed to obtain them, he may never have had the chance to be on this list at all. And as for his ability to rule the world, the best way I could see that happening would be through fear, keeping his enemies at bay by threatening to use the stones. But once the snap took place, he would still have half the universe to face if he were to try to take over the world. And that's sort of what happens, isn't it? He was tracked down and executed by Thor and the remaining Avengers. And whether we'd like to admit it or not, this shows, I know this sounds wrong, but a weak spot that other villains on this list just don't have. So Thanos is definitely capable of ruling the world as we know it, but there's an asterisk. Might need to undergo a bloody conquest to retrieve Infinity Stones first. At number 6, we've got Darkseid, born as Uxas, with royal status on the planet of Apokolips. Darkseid was born with supreme power to his father Yuga Khan and mother Hegra. Posing as one of the primary threats in most Superman storylines, Darkseid dedicates his life to taking life away. His main accolade came when he came in contact with the Martians, who shared with him the life equation, at which point Darkseid in all his evil glory theorized that there must be an anti-life equation as well. Google the equation if you want, it's a real bummer. Yeah, so basically, Darkseid is a bad dude. But who isn't on this list? What really sets him apart from the others is his ability to cheat death. When he's seemingly killed in a battle with his son Orion, his life force is able to live on past the destruction of his body and come back to get revenge, killing Orion with a time-traveling bullet. If I wanted to continue exploring all of Darkseid's evil accolades, this part of the video would be 20 minutes long, so I'll just say this. Darkseid is more than capable of taking over the world, having had plenty of experience on Apokolips. In fact, if he wasn't so obsessed with the anti-life equation, he probably would have done it 10 times over, at least. At number 5, we have Superboy Prime. This young supervillain comes from a version of Earth, Earth Prime, where he is the only superhero in existence. He grew up loving the DC universe, very meta, yes, particularly the Silver Age. But like ours, unfortunately, in his dimension, all these heroes are merely fiction, except for him. But after his homeworld is destroyed along with many other versions of Earth by what is known as Crisis on Infinite Earths, he becomes more and more angry and resentful about the loss of his old life and turns to the dark side, killing many heroes and villains in his way. Now, he is after all credited, should I use that word? With defeating the Justice League, Earth 2 Superman, and the Teen Titans among others, and shattering none other than Anti-Monitor's armor. But since we're talking about ruling the world purely by his somewhat naive, angst-fueled view on reality, he might not be able to maintain rule over the world for long. But nonetheless, this super house of a villain has the perfect balance of dimension-shattering power, insecurity, and resentment to force his way into a position of supreme reign over the world as we know it. Okay, at number 4 we've got Yuga Khan, the all-powerful first ruler of Apokolips, who was, for a long time, considered the most powerful being in the universe. Father to Darkseid, this ruler fits right into our list because we're talking about not just powerful beings, which Yuga Khan undoubtedly is, but villains that could rule the world, and Yuga Khan had a lot of experience ruling over Apokolips. His only downfall was that he wanted more power, which proved to be impossible. His attempt to uncover the source, which is defined as the cause of life itself, or the meaning of life if you will, eventually destroyed him. This proved that even the most powerful being in the world was no match for the limits of the universe. However, it does still say a lot that his insatiable thirst for power was the only cause for his downfall, because that very trait that Yuga Khan possesses is the very thing that would land him on this list. I mean, let's be honest, the first ruler of Apokolips would have no problem ruling over our world as we know it, would he? I don't think so. Gosh, this is getting hard. To be honest, these top threes could basically be interchangeable. At number 3, we have Galactus. Galactus is basically an interplanetary, interdimensional being that feeds on, yep, you got it, life. I'm sure you've seen this guy before on TV and comics in your nightmares. There's just something about him that makes me feel afraid for my life. Probably the part where he wants to consume it. Throughout the years in the Marvel Universe, Galactus has made many appearances, moving between worlds, taking what he wants, and often leaving planets bare of any life. What's terrifying and powerful about Galactus is that it's not like he's driven by some sort of anger or hatred for humanity and other life in the universe. He's just hungry. Every time he reappears with a vengeance, it's as though he's just trying to satiate a hunger that even he can't control. So if you're gonna ask me if I think he could take over the world, I would say yes. If he could eat the world, he can rule it, I imagine. This guy is so powerful that when the Silver Surfer manages to turn Galactus's own energy siphoning machines against him, his true form is revealed to be a sentient star. So there's no real contest here with how powerful this villain is. The only asterisk I may put here is that in the context of this list, there's a chance that he doesn't pull off a very steady reign over civilization, because as soon as he gets that insatiable hunger for life again, he'll have no world to rule. Number 2 on our list goes to Anti-Monitor. Born on one of the moons of an evil dimension called Qward, Anti-Monitor is basically the manifestation of evil. He was created billions of years ago after a scientist named Krona tried to witness the origins of life itself. So he was created from arguably one of the original events that brought evil into the universe. Then there was a million-year war with his good counterpart known as, you guessed it, Monitor. The results which was a draw. Boring. Then they both fell unconscious for 9 billion years. Even more boring, but the rest of this villain story is anything but boring. After his hibernation, he wakes up and destroys a whole universe. One of many in the future. You know why? Because another scientist, this one named Pariah, tried to observe the origins of the universe again. Anyway, Anti-Monitor becomes infinitely stronger from this, having created an antimatter universe, and sets out to wreak more havoc. This guy belongs right at the top of the list because he seems to only appear when the very essence of evil is released into the universe. He's huge, he literally eats universes for breakfast, and as a little added bit to the resume, he's known as being pretty good at leadership, having led an army of Qwardians and shadow demons on his conquest to take down whole universes. There's so much more to Anti-Monitor's story, and even though it sort of ends when Superman 2 kills him, I would argue that a villain that can consume whole universes could, if he so pleased, make a pit stop and rule the world for a bit. Maybe get bored of that, go and rule another world for a bit, and still make it home for dinner. And what would be for dinner, you ask? Probably another universe. There's no touching this guy. The only reason why I don't give him a number 1 spot is only because even though he'd be able to rule the world with ease, he'd probably not even choose to do so. His ambitions go way beyond conquering planets, so I mean, would his lack of interest be the very thing that got in the way of successfully taking over a tiny world? I'll leave that up to you guys. Alright, at number 1, we have a villain that ticks off all the boxes. He's extremely powerful, interdimensional, very, very evil, and has more mortal-like ambitions that would and have set his sights on ruling our world. And that is Kang the Conqueror. Now, I know what you're thinking. This guy isn't a universe destroyer. Okay, but remember, this is a list about the top 10 villains who could rule the world. And out of everyone in the Marvel Universe, Kang is arguably the most powerful evil villain who deals primarily with earthly ambitions. He's able to travel through time like it's part of his daily routine, constantly posing as a major threat to the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, and constantly manipulating the outcome of events on Earth and beyond due to his superior hindsight. But beyond that, his resume is insane, having already conquered thousands of worlds, over a 100 light-year conquest, destroying Washington, D.C., killing his own son, killing his own lover, trying to kill baby versions of the Avengers, and even killing past versions of himself, all to get to his final goal. Kang really stops at nothing to get what he wants, ignoring his love for even his closest allies and family members, and altering the course of multiple realities to see any outcome he desires. Also, he killed his lover because he was in limbo and basically got bored. This villain is the manifestation of fate. He chooses what happens in the world, and unlike the second on our list, he has many human-like traits that I would argue make him even more evil. There were early versions of Kang that were actually good, like Rama Tut, Immortus, and Iron Lad, but he chose evil over good, and actively uses his almost infinite power to kill countless people, and mutants from the Marvel Universe as well. Almost all of them at one point. He's ruthless, has an evil tyrannous king Henry VIII vibe, and would easily set his sights on our world if he so chose. And he has chosen. Many times before, in many different timelines. At number 10, we have Annihilus. Using the Cosmic Control Rod, Annihilus ameliorates his own well-being, spending most of his time trying to find ways to make himself, yes, immortal. The Rod is known to have almost limitless capabilities, so his efforts aren't in vain, as he has found ways to fend off disease, slowing down cellular degeneration, otherwise known as aging, and warding off heat and cold. He also uses it to fly super fast, which is another plus. The only reason why Annihilus is back at number 10 for me is that he seems to need the Cosmic Control Rod to achieve immortality. And even while he has it, he's known to be liable to make big mistakes due to his paranoia that others are going to try and snatch it from him. Remember kids, the real superpower is up here. Number 9 goes to Apocalypse. This villain, often facing off against the X-Men, originated in ancient Egypt, giving hints that he's capable of existing for hundreds of years at a time without meeting death. Yeah, so he's also known to have supreme control over his body from an atomic level, being capable of growing in size and density whenever he chooses, and adapting to his environment and fighting off disease. Not only that, but he's immune to aging again. So when Apocalypse was finally defeated by Cable, he wasn't actually killed and regenerated in a tomb in Aqaba. So there you have it. It seems like this guy will always be around. Our best bet is to keep him at bay for a while before he inevitably comes back, possibly repeating this process for eternity. Alright, at number 8 we have Mephisto, a demon creature who presents similarly to how humans view Satan. And yes, he did this to manipulate our singular views of evil through our tale of Satan the fallen angel. Regardless, Mephisto is known to be so powerful that he does not need food or water, or even oxygen to survive. He even has abilities to regenerate in the instances that he is damaged, going as far as regrowing limbs. And he can also see his own future if he so chooses. So even if something was coming his way that could somehow usurp his seemingly immortal powers, he would see it coming and put a stop to it before it could reach him. Mephisto proves to be a threat throughout the ages, and although he does face certain limitations to his powers and influence, this list isn't about power, but about immortality. So there you go. Number 7, we've got Anti-Monitor. Yes, this villain appears a lot on these powerful villains super lists, but I couldn't ignore him on this one even if I tried. His influence in the comics is immense, but what places him in this list is primarily his near infinite age. This guy was born in the early days of the cosmos, lived for over 9 billion years in a dormant state, and even fought a battle with his counterpart, Monitor, for 1,000,000 years. It's hard enough for most beings to live that long, let alone be in a constant battle the whole time. And on top of all this, he's also just proven to be nearly impossible to kill. Even when he's vanquished for good, he isn't really killed, but instead broken up into molecules and scattered through the universe. And he had to be punched into a star to make that happen, by Superman from Earth 2, with the help of Darkseid, Superboy Prime, Dr. Light, and heroic Lex Luthor. So I'd argue that Anti-Monitor definitely deserves a spot on this list. Number 6 on our list goes to the one and only Kang the Conqueror. This villain is so powerful that he's able to change the course of history with little to no effort. His ability to traverse through time gives him supreme insight, and also the capability to appear in any time in the history of our universe, future, past, and present. He's a real contender for this list because although he's been defeated in the past, he was really only in a state of limbo, and he never truly meets a final end. I mean, he's able to not only design the outcome of reality in most cases, but also just exist in any time he'd like. He once lived in ancient Egypt, and also the turn of the 20th century. The point is, Kang shows time and time again that he's capable of existing in multiple times throughout history, which I would argue could be a form of immortality. As Schrodinger's logic would go, Kang has and hasn't existed at every moment in history and the future. It would just be up to us to observe him, and well, Good luck with that. Alright, at number 5, I'm putting Dormammu. Am I pronouncing that right? Another villain who's been around for countless millennia, possibly even millions of years. Dormammu proves to be powerful enough and durable enough to possibly be considered immortal. One piece of evidence is his clash with Agamotto, a spawn of one of the Elder Gods where Dormammu actually held his own. And for those of you who don't know, Agamotto easily contended against Galactus himself. And if that wasn't enough to suggest Dormammu's potential for immortality, he's also immune to aging and harm of any kind, physical or mystical. His powers have also been used for resurrection in the past, so it's fair to say that stopping this guy will be tough, and arguably won't be permanent in any case. Okay, at number 4, we're looking at Surtur, the 1,000-foot tall fire giant who can move stuff with his mind. Surtur was the sworn enemy of Odin and Thor and eventually destroys Asgard. At a few points, Surtur is imprisoned and banished, but never completely destroyed. Even after one of these instances where Surtur was transported to the Sea of Eternal Light and frozen for all time, he still re-emerges after a Norwegian guy named Sven finds a medallion with connections to Surtur, and subsequently turns into him. Thank you so much, Sven. And once again, when he's finally defeated by the Asgardians, he isn't really, since he just finds himself resurrected in a realm called Muspelheim. There's one instance where he's then beheaded by the Twilight Sword, another where he's basically destroyed by Odin who steals the Eternal Flame from him, but based on his track record, I'm not buying that any of these instances are the last of him. We're in the top 3, folks, and at number 3 we have none other than Thanos. I know, yes, in the movies he was beheaded, but many argue that this isn't the end of him. Thanos is an ancient Eternal who was born on the planet Titan to his father Alars, also an Eternal. So, this dates Thanos back about 1,000,000 years, and Thanos himself is an Eternal, meaning we can at least deduct that he's immune to all disease and aging. In fact, Thanos was specifically banned by death from his realm, meaning it's almost confirmed that he can't be killed. So yeah, in the movie, spoiler alert, should have said that by now, we all saw him die. But by the laws of this character's storyline, this won't be the last we see of Thanos, no matter how severe the injury appears to be. Number 2, we've got the insatiable Galactus. This bad guy is hardly a villain anymore and more like a floating entity that feeds on the energy of life forms. Interdimensional and one of the oldest known beings to ever exist, Galactus always finds a way to bring evil to the cosmos. Even in his apparent death, he was replaced by Abraxas, who basically took over in his absence. As much as Galactus is able to endure, and despite his nearly infinite age, there are instances where he's weakened and put into submissive positions by other forces in the cosmos. The closest he comes to truly dying is when Thor and Galactus' attempted assault on the Black Winter goes horribly wrong and Thor turns on him, leaving him on the brink of death. A little too late, I'd say, considering you just let him consume 5 planets, Thor, but also good on you for killing Galactus sooner or later. But does Galactus ever die? Not really. Let's just hope that Abraxas doesn't come back again while he's gone. We don't want that. That guy's no good either. At number 1, we have the Goblin Entity. This being was created at the point of the Big Bang, so one of the oldest on our list for sure. That said, the power of this villain has sustained over billions of years, and just like Galactus, it is driven by its insatiable hunger for energy. It's basically a giant, dark entity that moves through the cosmos, ingesting everything in its way. It is confirmed that the Goblin Entity cannot die, and if it were to be killed, similarly to everyone else on this list, it would find a way to regenerate. It seems what we're dealing with in this top 10 is a group of villains that just won't stop, no matter how hard you try to defeat them. But perhaps by exploring the villains with potential immortality, we're also exploring the deepest depths of true metaphorical evil found in the DC and Marvel universes, in that in the real world as well, evil does always find its way back into the world, and all that can be done about it is temporary. Although those moments are sweet, where good wins, it's not long before we have to prepare for evil to return and rear its ugly head again.
And it's Yotat. Yotat overheard 2 Brood half-breeds telling his boss that they allegedly killed the Collector and had stolen his weapons collection. Yotat used this information to uncover the weapons cache, and then attempted to trade them to another mob boss in exchange for a membership in his organization. But this mob boss named Diogo had other other ideas. He betrayed Yotat, shooting him and then leaving for dead, and then blowing up the weapons depot with Yotat inside. However, somehow he survived the explosion and was actually transformed by it. And when the world was transformed into Battleworld for the Secret Wars storyline, Yotat caught up with Gyogo at the Sobolski bar on Nowhere. After killing the man who betrayed him, Yotat was confronted by Rocket Raccoon. Rocket attempted to execute him for what he viewed as a murder, only to see that his blast had no effect. Drax the Destroyer then rescued Rocket Raccoon by knocking Yotat unconscious, and then the Nova Corps arrived to take him into custody. However, later on he did defeat the Guardians after a few months, but this guy looks awesome too. Just look at it. It looks badass. And at 9, the Collector. Taneleer Tavan is one of the oldest living beings in the universe. His species at Cygnus X1 was one of the first to evolve after the Big Bang. Death took Tavan as the last surviving representative of his species and then gave him total immortality. Tavan, as well as one of the representatives of each of the first species in the universe, cannot die. These people have associated among themselves to create the Elders of the Universe. However, after his wife Matani died, he learned that one of the factors of his immortality was the will to live, and Matani had lost hers. Tavan then decided that he would not suffer the same fate and looked for a goal to dedicate his life to. He then had a vision, seeing powerful things that would rise, determined to destroy the universe. And he decided to prevent this from happening, and that he would dedicate his life to collecting artifacts and living beings throughout the universe and place them out of danger. Then, after the destruction of the universe, he could repopulate it and bequeath the knowledge of cultures from the past. So he became the Collector to continue being immortal, which is certainly an interesting origin story. And at 8, Ronan the Accuser. In the MCU, Ronan was a radical Kree warlord and former member of the Accusers. In 1995, during the Kree Skrull War, Ronan worked with Yon-Rogg and the Star Force after the ambush in Torfa to wipe out the last of the Skrull refugees. Ronan and the Accusers were then called to drop warheads on Earth to wipe out the remaining Skrull opposition there, but was forced to retreat when Captain Marvel launched a counteroffensive against the Kree, promising retribution. You will get retribution. Further disgusted by the peace treaty made between the Kree Empire and Xandar, Ronan initiated a new campaign to eradicate the Xandarnians by forging an alliance with Thanos, offering the orb in exchange for the destruction of Xandar. After a long search, Ronan did acquire the orb, but after having seen its true destructive capabilities, betrayed Thanos and chose to take the orb's power for himself. Using this newfound power, he attacked Xandar, only to be defeated and killed by the Guardians of the Galaxy in an iconic dance battle. But honestly, with the power of an Infinity Stone, it's a wonder how he actually managed to lose. But that single stone still made him pretty damn powerful. And at 7, Jason. Jason was the only son of the previous Emperor of Spartax, and therefore their sole heir to the throne. He was summoned by his father when the war broke out between the Spartax and the Badoon, and on his way back home he was forced to crash land on Earth, where he fell in love with a human woman named Meredith Quill. The two began a short relationship before Jason was forced to leave to wage war for the Spartax. Meredith would later go on to give birth to his son, Peter Quill. Yeah, that's right, MCU fans. In the comics, Peter's dad is actually Emperor of Spartax and not Ego the Living Planet, which honestly makes more sense given that, you know, Ego is a whole planet. But years later, Jason joined the other members of the Galactic Council to declare Earth off limits to extraterrestrial interaction. Once his son defended Earth from a Badoon attack though, Jason sent Spartax soldiers to capture him and his team of Guardians of the Galaxy. However, the Guardians managed to escape and flee. And at 6, Thane. Thane is the secret Inhuman son of Thanos. After a descendant Inhuman tribe ran afoul of Thanos and his army, one Inhuman woman returned home pregnant with Thanos' child. I don't even want to know how that worked. The son of Thanos was convinced by Jason that the X-Men and the Guardians had committed such a massacre in an attempt to remove him from the conflict, thus giving Thane a reason to join his side. After reacquiring the Black Vortex, Thane submitted to it. This increased his power by 10-fold. Basically, the Black Vortex is like a mirror-like object that when you see your reflection, it shows you the ideal version of yourself and then turns you into that ideal version. So yeah, this dude's powers increased a lot, turning him into an incredibly powerful villain. As part of his deal with Mr. Knife, Thane then used his cosmically enhanced power to encase the entirety of Spartax in his Amber construct. The trapped Spartax would later be traded to the Brood by Mr. Knife in exchange for it taking advantage of their expansion. A freaking cosmically enhanced son of Thanos? Yeah, that's pretty freaking powerful. That's nuts. Halfway through into number 5, Thanos. While usually portrayed as an evil bent villain, many stories have alternately depicted Thanos as having a twisted moral compass and thinking that his actions are actually justified. The character's perhaps best known role came in the 1991 storyline of the Infinity Gauntlet, the culmination of several previous story arcs, which saw him successfully assembling the 6 Infinity Gems into a single gauntlet and then using them to wipe out half the universe's population, including many of its heroes, in an effort to earn the affection of Mistress Death, the living embodiment of death in the Marvel Universe. Yeah, this dude wanted to get it on with death. Although these events were later undone, the storyline has remained one of the most popular published by Marvel, which was also later adapted into the MCU with the Infinity War and Endgame movies, which are the 2 highest grossing Marvel movies of all time, and the 2 highest grossing superhero movies of all time, which only serves to show the absolute power that the Mad Titan has over the Marvel Universe. Plus, he also managed to collect all the Infinity Gems and then wipe out half the universe just to get Lady Death on his dick. So I mean, he's pretty crazy. Or dare I say, mad. In it for Ego. In the MCU, Ego was a celestial, a primordial and powerful being, and the biological father of Peter Quill. A living planet with a humanoid extension of himself, Ego sought to find meaning in his life and, to achieve this end, planned to remake the entire universe via an omnidimensional extinction level event known as the Expansion, using seeds planted on various worlds to terraform them into new extensions of himself, thereby eradicating all other life in the universe but himself. You get it? This process required 2 Celestials, however, so Ego traveled across the universe, siring children on humanoid and alien planets everywhere in an attempt to produce a celestial heir, eventually having thousands of children. Have you seen the show Seed? Yeah, it's like that. Ego hired the Yondu Ravager clan to abduct and transport some of these offspring to his planet, though none of them showed signs of having inherited celestial DNA, so Ego killed them. However, when he learned of a man from Earth who held an Infinity Stone without dying, he knew this must be the celestial son he had with Meredith Quill. But I think the most impressive part about this character is that not only is he a celestial, but he is also the commander from Sky High, meaning that technically Peter Quill is Will Stronghold, and honestly, that's a theory I can get behind. Sky High is a good movie, you should watch it. If you haven't seen it, watch Sky High. Penultimately, in number 3, Zeus. Zeus is a member of the Olympians, a group of humanoid beings that hail from the pocket dimension of Olympus. He was worshipped by the humans of ancient Greece and the Roman Empire. He is supreme monarch of the Olympians, god of the heavens, sky, and weather. Kinda like the 3 Doris Pokemon. From Gen 5, from Black and White, Thunderous, Landorus, and Tornadus? Yeah. Zeus was the youngest son of the Titan Kronos, who ruled Olympus, and Rhea. The Titans were the offspring of the sky god Uranus and the primal earth goddess of Gaia. Kronos overthrew his father's rule by fatally wounding him, and then the dying Uranus prophesies that Kronos would be overthrown by his own children, which I guess is kinda poetic. As a result of this though, upon the birth of each of his own children, Kronos had them imprisoned in Tartarus, the most despicable section of the extra dimension known as Hades. Yeah, hell. However, appalled by the mistreatment of their children, Kronos' wife Rhea concealed their 6th pregnancy from him and secretly gave birth to Zeus, and then gave the infant Zeus to Gaia for safekeeping. I don't know why I need to explain how a literal god of Olympus is a powerful villain. Like, do I really need to do that? I don't think so. I should have just said Zeus and then moved on. But ultimately, in number 2, Galactus. Galactus is the sole survivor of the 6th incarnation of the multiverse. Originally, Galactus was a humanoid named Galen, born in the previous incarnation of Earth 616 on planet Ta, a paradise-like world whose civilization is said to have the most advanced of any of the known universe at the time. However, the 6th Infinity and all its universes were in their final stages of collapse due to the multiversal renewal cycle, being consumed by the abstract entity known as the Black Winter. When the cosmos was going to meet its natural end, Galen was then approached by the embodiment of the 6th Infinity, the sentience of the multiverse basically, who merged its essence with the mortal Galen, this way giving birth to a new entity that would survive the multiversal renewal, Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds. However, the Black Winter also presented an alternate account of these events, saying that Galen's survival was it sparing him, and then turned him into Galactus to mark him as its herald. Galactus possesses the immeasurable power cosmic, and is one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, having near limitless godlike powers, and being considered an omnipotent entity. He's mega OP if he's eaten enough worlds. And that's kinda like me. I relate. And finally, in at number 1, Michael Korvac. Being first introduced in Giant Size Defenders number 3 in 1975, Michael Korvac's father was killed due to events surrounding his birth in 2977. He was raised by his mother, but when the solar system he lived on Earth 691 and its colonies became the target for the Brotherhood of Badoon, Michael became a traitor and helped the Brotherhood. However, after a few moments of hesitation, he was cut in half and fused with his computer by the Brotherhood, turning him into a cyborg of sorts. But this seemed to do more harm than good, at least for the Brotherhood, since now Korvac was dead set on killing those who did this to him. So, way to go. At least until the Grandmaster transported him to battle Doctor Strange and the Defenders. Korvac intentionally lost this battle and instead siphoned some of the Grandmaster's power using his new cybernetic abilities, making him even more powerful than before. Eventually, this guy ends up impersonating Kang the Conqueror and the Watcher, and with his ability to siphon power from others, this makes him one of the scariest villains in the Marvel Universe. At least if he was smart about it and didn't get himself killed. He ends up wiping himself out of existence after killing basically all the Avengers and the Guardians though. It's freaking nuts, okay?
Coming in at number 10 as a bit of an honorable mention is the Batman Who Laughs. Now, the reason this villain is only getting an honorable mention is because he's relatively new and has had a huge amount of publicity in the few years since his creation. But I still do think this character deserves some more exploration further down the road. As a twisted combination of Bruce Wayne and the Joker from the Dark Multiverse, the Batman Who Laughs was an incredibly intimidating villain that only got even more powerful when he gained the powers of Dr. Manhattan and became the Darkest Knight. But seeing as how he was then killed by God Mode Wonder Woman, and I do think that the Batman Who Laughs deserves a comeback in the near future so that we can see what really happens when the true Batman and the Batman Who Laughs go head to head. Coming in at number 9, we have Owlman, the evil opposite of Batman from Earth 3. Born under the name of Thomas Wayne Jr., as a young boy, Owlman murdered his younger brother Bruce and had his butler Alfred kill his parents to ensure that the Wayne fortune was not wasted by their frivolous spending. Using his costumed identity as Owlman to intimidate the leaders of Gotham into falling under his control, Owlman was a twisted version of everything that Batman stood for, and every time their universes have crossed over has led to some incredibly dramatic battles. And with the DC Omniverse recently having become a lot more open than it was during the New 52 era, it's only a matter of time before Owlman and Batman are trying to outwit one another once more. Coming in at number 8, we have the malicious psychologist known as Hugo Strange. One of Batman's oldest villains, originally debuting only 9 issues after the Caped Crusader himself in Detective Comics, Professor Hugo Strange was also one of the very first villains to ever figure out his secret identity as Bruce Wayne. While initially depicted as a typical mad scientist stereotype, using a weather machine to hide his minions' robberies with a thick layer of fog, more recent interpretations of the character have seen him as a devious manipulator, using his position of power as a doctor of psychology to examine the criminals of Arkham Asylum and scheming to gain power in Gotham City. It's this emphasis on mental ability rather than actual superpowers that makes Hugo Strange such an interesting villain to deal with, and why he definitely deserves to come back in a major Batman storyline. Coming in at number 7, we have the intelligent zombie, Solomon Grundy. Inspired by a 19th century English nursery rhyme, Solomon Grundy was born centuries ago as a wealthy merchant, but after being murdered and having his body dumped in a swamp with mystical properties, he's now cursed to constantly be resurrected with slightly different properties each time. Usually being depicted as an incredibly physically strong zombie, Grundy is also incredibly resilient to both magic and physical damage, meaning that every time he's faced by either Batman or Superman, they need to figure out a clever new way to defeat him. Solomon Grundy has always been a dependable muscle for other villains throughout the years, but it would be nice to see him take more of a starring role in an upcoming Batman story. Coming in at number 6, we have Catman. Yep, that's not a typo, there's an actual Batman villain named Catman, and we'd love to see more of him in the comics as he continues to walk the fine line between villain and anti-hero. Born under the name Thomas Blake, Catman was initially a famous lion trapper that decided a life of crime was a better use of his peak human abilities, and even based his initial costume on that of the already established villain Catwoman. However, after years of being thwarted by Batman and becoming mocked by other supervillains, Catman reformed himself after some time in the jungle into becoming an anti-hero, and was most recently seen working alongside the Suicide Squad. With all of this character development making him more than just a joke character, Catman definitely deserves to face off against Batman once more. Coming in at number 5, we have Mr. Bloom, the plant-based villain. With the ability to plant seeds within people that would grant them incredible superpowers but at the cost of their lifespan, Mr. Bloom threw Gotham into chaos during a period where Bruce Wayne was unable to be Batman and Commissioner James Gordon had instead taken up the cape and cowl. The coolest thing about Mr. Bloom wasn't just the unique look of his powers and his visual design, but how they were able to manipulate the people and villains of Gotham into a new status quo so easily. Seeing this villain have a rematch with Bruce Wayne, or even get to interact more with the similarly plant-based Poison Ivy, seems like an obvious choice for a comeback, and I can't wait to see what this villain does next. Coming in at number 4, we have Prometheus. While not an alternate reality version of Bruce Wayne like several other villains on this list, Prometheus is still a dark reflection of the Batman, given that he had to watch his criminal parents be gunned down Bonnie and Clyde style by Gotham City police forces. Waging war against law enforcement and justice of any kind, Prometheus is made all the deadlier with his helmet that allows him to download fighting skills directly into his brain. It's this deadly combo of physical prowess and ideological differences that make Prometheus one of the more interesting Bat villains, and someone who definitely needs to be featured more often. Coming in at number 3, we have the iconic Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face. Originally fighting for the side of justice with Bruce Wayne as Gotham's district attorney, Harvey Dent's mind was split in two following an acid attack that scarred exactly one half of his face. Making all of his decisions through a coin flip based on his past childhood trauma, Two-Face is one of the most well-known villains of Batman, but hasn't gotten a chance in recent years to really headline an event as a villain, usually only taking the focus in smaller storylines or as a supporting character. Personally, I think Two-Face is long overdue to take his place as a master of the criminal underworld. Coming in at number 2, we have Bruce Wayne's former childhood friend and current adulthood enemy, Hush. Born under the name of Thomas Elliot, Hush as a child was one of the first people to inspire Bruce on his road to becoming Batman. However, Thomas Elliot was a deranged child, wishing to have his family's fortune for himself and killing both of his parents to have it. After traveling the world and training to become a warrior, Hush adopted his supervillain persona and allied himself with the Riddler to rid the world of Bruce Wayne, organizing many of his enemies and even allies against him. And while the villain has appeared several times since, it's been a while since we've truly gotten to see the master manipulator Hush at work. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the Phantasm, aka Andrea Beaumont. Originally debuting in the animated film Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, Andrea Beaumont was Bruce Wayne's first love, the girl he almost considered abandoning his mission as Batman for before the mission had even begun. Unfortunately for Bruce, Andrea and his relationship was forced to an end by the death of her father, causing Andrea to begin her descent into becoming the vengeful spirit known as the Phantasm. As a villain with an incredibly cool design and a very personal connection to Batman, the Phantasm has been only recently seen in the comics, and definitely takes my top pick for the villain that most deserves another storyline.
In at 10, Sin Eater. Stanley Carter's parents were addicts who ended up falling in love with each other. Stanley's father, though, later died, leaving Stanley's mother pregnant and alone. Stanley's mother was sent to a rehabilitation clinic, and Stanley went to be raised by his grandparents in the Ozark Mountains. Stanley's grandfather was a zealous pastor who reveled his son and took it out on Stanley. After Stanley's grandfather died due to a rattler bite, this congregation held a sin-eating ritual for him, and young Stanley presumably saw a Sin Eater, a masked hermit who would eat fruit placed in the corpse of someone's body to take the dead sins for himself, because, you know, that's not gonna screw up a child's development. Stanley ended up joining the NYPD and became a detective after growing up, having multiple instances of executing criminals, particularly drug traffickers, including his own partner. This is is where he really became the Sin Eater, a maniacal serial killer and probably one of Spider-Man's scariest foes with no powers, but with the MO of killing anyone who sins. The Sin Eater's first victim was actually his own lover, police captor Jean DeWolf, whose death attracted attention throughout all New York City, including their friend Spider-Man. The Sin Eater had stolen DeWolf's purse, creating a precedent of taking one personal object for each of his victims, and this object would usually have to be associated with the victim's sin in some way. It's probably going to be a loose way, but yeah. In 9, Atrocity. Introduced and only seen in the Spider-Man game Spider-Man Edge of Time from 2011, Atrocity was created after Anti-Venom went into a blind rage, accidentally knocked Otto Octavius and Walker Sloan into Walker Sloan's gateway. It was like a time gateway. The three fused in the space-time continuum. I tried getting Taylor to put this on a list for ages, so I'm gonna put it here because holy damn, this is one hell of a villain that I want to see come back. Atrocity would occasionally attack Peter Parker or Miguel O'Hara with its teleporting tentacles throughout their journey in Alchemax's building, until it eventually revealed itself and attacked Peter Parker. Atrocity was defeated but would later appear again, attempting to kill Peter Parker at the same time the CEO was fighting Miguel O'Hara. Peter manipulated Atrocity into attacking electrified pillars, stunning it. Peter took this opportunity to remove those tentacles and send them through the time gateway. These tentacles were also used to drain the Alchemax CEO of his powers. After both Atrocity and the CEO, who is revealed to be Peter Parker, were vulnerable, they were knocked into the gateway together, simultaneously resetting the timeline. This absolute monstrosity is able to teleport through time and space, in addition to all of his other powers. So yeah, Atrocity for sure needs to make a comeback. I want to see this guy. He only appeared once. He's probably one of the most horrifying looking villains of all time. Please. And at 8, Mr. Negative. Martin Lee was a seemingly good-willed philanthropist who ran a volunteer soup kitchen called Feast, where May Parker volunteered, because of course she did. While he was also the crime boss of Chinatown, Mr. Negative. Despite being a crime lord, Lee was seemingly a kind and generous man. The Feast project displayed healing powers for people of various illnesses, although the cause of this healing was actually unknown, but it turned out to be Lee himself. The public knows that the person known as Martin Lee was an illegal Chinese immigrant who attempted to travel to America to be with his wife. In China, he ran a factory, but because of his lack of resources to bribe the Communist Party, he could not develop his business and grew tired of that country. Although this Martin Lee is not actually Martin Lee, but a former smuggler who just used Lee's identity after he died. Mr. Negative first came into conflict with Spider-Man when he made a power play towards taking control of New York's criminal underworld by attempting to wipe out all existing members of the Kernali and Maggia crime families, using a DNA-specific bioweapon called Devil's Breath. Mr. Negative is also responsible for the creation of Anti-Venom, and while he was featured in the 2018 Spider-Man game, it's been like 3 years, so he needs to show up again. And at 7, The Spot. As a scientist working for the Kingpin, Dr. Owen was assigned to reproduce the radiation levels of the Vigilante cloak to find a way to artificially mimic his powers. Working late one night, he actually succeeded, creating a solid black circular portal. In doing so, however, the drain on the city's power became so great a blackout washed over the city, causing the portal to shimmer and destabilize. Fearful of losing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Owen stepped into it, which was a horrible idea. The power shortage caused the portal to send him into a different dimension, a place of half darkness and half light, kinda like my mind. When Owen emerged back in his lab, his body had undergone a radical transformation. The portals from the other dimension had adhered to his skin, covering him from head to toe in black spots. But just think about how crazy OP this villain is, alright? He has the ability to control these portals. Like, if the man wanted to decapitate you, instantly he could. Best doctor in a sense, I guess. That's still horrifying. The Spider-Man in the 90s cartoon would use these portals against Owen, but if he had just decided that he wanted to just destroy him, he could have, and Spider-Man would have had nothing to do. So yeah, I want to see him make an appearance again, somehow. And at 6, Spider-Side. Spider-Side is a more obscure and odd Spider-Man villain, but I still think he would be pretty badass. Being first introduced as Spider-Side in New Warriors number 61, this version of Peter Parker is one of the clones made by Dr. Miles Warren, because we all know how much we love clones, which is an entirely separate villain that caused the whole clone debacle and creation of Scarlet Spider and a whole lot of other things. What's notable about Spider-Side, however, is not only him having all of Spider-Man's powers, but also the ability to stretch and warp his body at will, similar to Mr. Fantastic. Spider-Side is certainly deadly as well, helping Jackal to release a virus in Springfield, Pennsylvania, resulting in the deaths of 2,600 people. But either way, Spider-Side, with all the abilities of Spider-Man and Mr. Fantastic, makes him pretty damn powerful, so I want to see him come back. They didn't do much with him, okay? And I like the name Spider-Side. Any evil Spider-Man, really, just Bring me more. Halfway through into number 5, Red Goblin. After the collapse of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Carnage symbiote was secured in the Lockbox, a privately run vault at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Agents Crane and Coleman infiltrated the Lockbox and stole the symbiote, delivering it to their employer, Norman Osborn. Yeah, you see where this is going. After receiving the symbiote, Osborn bonded with it to become the new Carnage, hoping that it would be the key to regaining his Green Goblin persona. While the symbiote initially seized control of him, Norman offered to teach it more nuanced and sadistic ways to kill, an offer that the symbiote eagerly accepted. The fact that you know more sadistic ways to kill people than a freaking mad symbiote is a whole other topic though, dude. The symbiote turned over control to its new host, restoring his appearance and purging his body of the nanites, preventing him from augmenting himself with Goblin formula. Osborn used the symbiote to kill Phil Urich, and after pretending to be mortally wounded in a rematch against Spider-Man as the Green Goblin, unveiled his new partner by transforming into the monstrous Red Goblin. Osborn used the symbiote to great effect, incapacitating Spider-Man's allies and loved ones, and bonding a portion of the symbiote to his grandson to turn him into the new Goblin child. Spidey was only able to defeat Red Goblin by taunting Osborn, saying that killing him would only give Carnage the credit and not him, which caused Osborn to remove the symbiote from himself. So he couldn't defeat Red Goblin, he had to defeat Osborn. Yeah, this is one of my favorite Carnage versions, so I want to see this come back, please. Like the next Venom movie. Or a No Way Home. In at number 4, Demogoblin. After losing fights with Spider-Man and the Green Goblin, Jason Philip Macendale Jr., aka Hobgoblin, took advantage of the Inferno Crisis by following several demons back to their lair and confronting their demonic Lord Natshir. Macendale wanted enough power to defeat his enemies, and offered his soul to the demon in exchange for such power. When the demon stopped laughing, he decided that Macendale's effort was worth something even if his soul wasn't, and he had him possessed. This gave Macendale the physical strength that he craved, coupled with superhuman speed and endurance. Unfortunately, I guess you could say for him at least, the demon who possessed him proved to be incompatible, and the two fought many a battle for control over Macendale's physical form until the demon literally ripped himself out of his human host and began a separate existence as the Demogoblin, a form of anti-hero in a sense who would kill anyone who has sinned, which is basically everyone. Except he would stay away from children, even dying to protect one. Getting close to the end in at number 3, Shocker. Okay, he's not really a forgotten villain, but Herman Schultz's parents died when his younger brother Marty was a boy. From a young age, Schultz turned to a life of crime, and soon realized that he wasn't really good at it, having been arrested several times. After one particular robbery gone wrong, Herman was arrested again, but was sent to the prison workshop, where he used the resources around him to build projects and build gauntlets that sent out shock waves which quickly opened safes as well, giving him a much needed one-up on the authorities. Now, I know what you're thinking, okay? Why am I talking about Shocker? Everyone knows who he is. Well, have you seen the MCU version of this guy? Okay, we need a better one. Come on, give me an actual Shocker. Shocker has the ability to shock his enemies with his handheld vibro shock units, but because the vibrations were so fierce, he has to wear a heavily insulated suit, which kind of looks like a mattress, but still. During his first outing as the self-styled Shocker, he ran into and defeated Spider-Man. Plus, I mean, he's the Shocker, I shock people. Give me a better version, okay? With a seemingly minute introduction into the MCU, I want to see a better version. Do it! Penultimately, in at number 2, The Swarm. Fritz von Meyer was once a fascist scientist, the details of which remain unrevealed. But von Meyer fled Germany at the end of World War II to settle in South America. A work expert on toxic poisons and apiculture, which is beekeeping, he continued his research on the breeding patterns of killer bees. One day, he found a hive unlike any other he had ever seen. The bees exhibited no fear and were unusually passive, and seemed to have a highly developed sense of intelligence. Believing that a nearby meteorite bombardment had somehow mutated these bees, von Meyer built a device that he hoped would reawaken the bees' killer instincts so that they could serve him. However, when they were no longer passive, they began to swarm all over von Meyer, killing him. In the midst of his death, though, his consciousness was shredded, dissipating into the swarms of bees. Thus, von Meyer became an aggregate being, like a living embodiment of the swarm, kind of like Spider-Man, but with bees. This is probably one of the weirdest but most fascinating villains I've ever seen, and certainly deserves a comeback. However, not as much as number 1, but I gotta admit, being named Fritz and then having your agony possess a whole load of bees, that's getting too close to FNAF for me, okay? I don't like it. Finally, in at number 1, Spider Carnage. We all knew this was going to be on the list, at least if you know me and my favorite Spider-Man villains. However, Spider Carnage isn't just a Spider-Man villain, he's an alternate version of Spider-Man. Hailing from one of the many Earths, this character was introduced in the 90s Spider-Man animated series, my favorite Spider-Man animated series, might I add. This Peter's life was actually very similar to the main Spider-Man, except this version also lost Aunt May and developed a resentment for humanity. And then he had to deal with a clone, which definitely sucked. Until he and the clone learned that the one who they thought was the clone, who was going by Ben Reilly at the time, could actually be the real Peter Parker, and that broke this Peter. A Carnage symbiote from another universe actually sensed this hatred and resentment, and through a portal created by Jonathan Ohm, it bonded with this Peter, driving him even more insane, and then started calling himself Spider Carnage. From my understanding, this character hasn't been seen since that final episode of the series, and I want him to make a comeback. Please, add this character to the MCU. Like, if we're getting 3 Spider-Man, why not just throw Carnage from some other universe in there too, and then have him bond with like Tobey's, because apparently Tobey's a bad person now. Even though I'm dressed like the Spider-Man 3 version, yes, that's exactly why I wore this suit today, specifically for that reason, but yeah. In at 10, Baron Blood. Lord John Falsworth was the youngest of 2 sons of Lord William Falsworth, one of the wealthiest members of the British aristocracy in late Victorian and Edwardian times. John left embittered when his older brother Montgomery inherited the title and the bulk of his estate upon William's death, shortly before World War I. Eventually, Falsworth sought the Castle Dracula in Romania in order to find and control the Dracula as a means of achieving immense wealth and power. However, Falsworth fell victim to Dracula's hypnotic powers because, you know, he's a vampire, and was turned into a vampire himself. Dracula bid Falsworth to return to England to wreak havoc upon the country that had repulsed him earlier. Although Falsworth's activities remained largely unrevealed during this time, at some point he again offered his services to the emerging fascist regime in Germany. That's right, folks. We gotta... can't really say it. German scientists performed painful experiments which enabled him to avoid his vulnerability to direct sunlight, and during World War II, German intelligence once again sent Falsworth to England to continue a new reign of terror. Wonderful. And at 9, Batman. Bruce Wayne died when the vigilante Batman was turned into a vampire. With now only one side of his dual life to take care of, the vampire haunts the nights, frightening and biting criminals. With most of the vampires being destroyed, Batman confronted Dracula and killed him by impaling the ancient vampire on a tree that was destroyed by lightning. However, the victory came at a cost, because during the fight, Dracula successfully drained the last of Batman's blood, destroying his humanity. Nonetheless, Batman retained his sense of self and assured Alfred that only Bruce Wayne had died, the Batman will live on. And thanks to his new vampiric powers, he would be able to protect Gotham City forever. Because, you know, immortality. Not only that though, but then Batman went on to turn the other Justice League members into vampires. Batman lost his supernatural companion of a vampirized Catwoman when she took a fatal crossbow bolt that was aimed at him. Overcome with rage over the death of the only person able to control his bloodlust, Batman killed the Joker and drained all his blood, which only led to more draining. And at 8, Zaris. Zaris is the son of Dracula. Angry with humanity encroaching into vampire territory and unhappy with his father's leadership, Zaris created a secret alliance with the leaders of various vampire sects. The Claw sect, which was warriors, the Charnaputra sect, Mysticos sect, Nosferatu sect, Atlantean sect, the Moshka sect, and the Siren sect, all to overthrow his father. He accomplished this at the Centennial Meeting of the Vampires. Yeah, they have a meeting every 100 years. He and his allies drove stakes into Dracula and cut his head off, and his allies, like Mysticos, invented devices which cancelled the frequencies of light that were harmful to vampires. So Zaris decided to use these devices to create a new, more dominant place in the world for vampires. He gave these devices to his allies so they could stage a raid on Krieger sect's fortress, eliminating their senior leadership. A vampire with devices that cancel out what the vampire's weaknesses are? No thanks. And at number 7, Harkon Volkihar. Lord Volkihar is actually the main antagonist of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim's DLC Dawnguard's main storyline. This vampire lord is not only a vampire, but he can also shapeshift into a vampire lord form that gives him a boost to all of his abilities and magics. Lord Volkihar once read a prophecy about a bow that could blot out the sun permanently, causing Skyrim to be a land free for vampires to roam. But to complete this prophecy, he needs Auriel's bow, which is technically also known as as Akatosh's bow, since Oriel is just the elven name for Akatosh. And a daughter of Cold Harbor, which was a pure-blooded vampire made by the Daedric Lord Molag Bal after a, let's call it a ritual. This nearly came to fruition when you brought him both the bow and his own daughter before your final battle. So if you didn't end up winning, you'd be handing this vampiric lord everything he needs to take over Skyrim. So yeah, it's pretty messed up. And that's even if you don't become a vampire lord in the storyline, which you also can do. However, you end up still having to kill Harkin anyway, since he doesn't really need you anymore, etc. So yeah, pretty powerful dude, unless you have like a 100 archery skill. And at 6, The Flash. Barry Allen, aka The Flash, is one of the former heroes who turned into a bloodthirsty vampire after Batman spread the vampiric plague throughout the world of Earth 43. He confronts Wally West from a different world and attempts to kill him. However, before he can succeed, he was killed by Roy Harper from his world, who shot him with wooden arrows in the back. Because, you know, it's like wooden stakes. But even if he went down easily, that does not mean he wasn't powerful, since, you know, a vampire with the powers of the Flash, and not just any Flash, but Barry Allen, the literal Speed Force himself, basically. Yeah, I don't think you really need to see why that's absolutely terrifying. If he hadn't have been killed by Roy, he would have wiped out humanity, and I think that's the reason why he had to be killed, so that didn't happen, because there is literally no way to defend against that, especially since Batman, the one who always has a plan to stop Justice League members, was the one who turned him, so there's no one really to fight him now. Halfway through into number 5, Morbius. First being introduced in Amazing Spider-Man number 101 in 1971, Dr. Michael Morbius was a scientist born in Greece who became a Nobel Prize winning biochemist. He suffered from a blood disease and developed an experimental treatment in an effort to cure it. Its side effects though turned him into a vampire adjacent who needs to consume blood in order to survive, and gain typical vampire characteristics such as an aversion to sunlight and the powers of flight, enhanced strength, speed, and a healing factor. His overall appearance changed as well. He gained fangs, his nose flattened to appear more bat-like, and his skin became extremely pale, like me. But he has less of a nose and sharper teeth. Additionally, the victims of his bite would turn into living vampires themselves, which is absolutely nuts. This character also made an appearance in the 90s Spider-Man animated series, which is literally my favorite thing in the world. However, since it was a kid's show, he couldn't consume blood, so instead he consumed plasma. And his origin was changed as well, so it could kind of be intertwined with Peter's, when he spliced his DNA with Peter Parker's using the neurogenic recombinator, and then a bat jumped in front of the ray. And in 4, Dracula. In Marvel Comics, Count Dracula is a centuries-old vampire, sorcerer, and Transylvanian nobleman who rules from his namesake fortress known as Castle Dracula. He is the supreme ruler and world's most powerful vampire. Originally the Wallachian ruler Vlad the Impaler, he turned himself into a vampire following a battle with the invading Ottoman Empire, seeking revenge to, you know, destroy his enemies, because of course. Driven by a lust for power, companionship, and blood, his centuries of undead existence have brought him into conflict with vampire hunters, other immortals, and in the modern age, superheroes. Dracula has a vast network of loyal servants, cultists, brides, and minions who regularly assist him and attempt to resurrect him if he actually ends up dying. Recently, Dracula and his followers have taken up refuge in Chernobyl, creating a new vampire nation and bringing him into conflict with the Avengers. But given that like he's in essence the original vampire, I feel like he deserves to be on this list. Also, in the Marvel universe, his name is Vlad, which just makes me think of Vlad Plasmius from Danny Phantom, and I love Danny Phantom, so. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Ultraman. Ultraman was turned into a vampire by Batman, which doesn't really make sense because he's a Kryptonian, so like without kryptonite fangs, how did Batman pierce his skin? But you know, whatever. Ultraman, along with many Supermen of the multiverse, were kidnapped by the Prophecy to steal their powers, but they were freed by the Justice Incarnate. Later on, Ultraman confronted Wally West from a different world along with the Flash and attempted to kill him, but Wally managed to knock him down with his super speed fist and hold him down with dozens of wooden stakes. And while he seemingly was defeated by those wooden stakes, I don't think you need an explanation as to why a Superman with vampire powers is a bad idea. Okay, that's horrifying. Although this does beg the question, does it cancel out like the whole sun powers thing, since like vampires are weak to sunlight but Superman uses the yellow sun to get his powers? Or is it just like that a Kryptonian vampire is double weak to a red sun? Because he's already double weak to a red sun, but does that mean that like he doesn't really have powers? I don't know. It's an interesting debate that I believe you should have in the comments, but respectfully. Can't believe I'm saying that, because no one's gonna listen. Who am I kidding? But ultimately, in at number 2, the Alpha Vampire. In the world of Supernatural, the Alpha Vampire was the very first vampire and basically father of all other vampires. He was one of the Alpha monsters captured and interrogated by Crowley and Castiel in their efforts to locate Purgatory. He escaped Crowley's prison though and set up a new nest in North Dakota, and then Montana. He was later tracked down for his blood for the weapon to defeat the Leviathans, and ultimately recognizing a common enemy, he actually gave the Winchesters his blood without a fight. During an attack on the British Men of Letters though, the Alpha Vampire was killed by Sam Winchester with the cult, like the demon cult that can for some reason kill literally everything. I don't know how, but whatever. The Alpha Vampire is first glimpsed briefly flashing in the minds of his children as it's commanding them to recruit more of his army in like season 6. Nothing is known about this particular monster aside from the fact that its messages can be heard by all other vampires, and he can also just knock them out if he wants to. Dean ends up seeing this vision while he is infected, but yeah, the daddy of all other vamps? That's a powerful boy. Finally, in at number 1, Varney. Varney was a human or Gigantopithecus sorcerer that once lived in like 10,000 BC. Varney served in the cult of the Darkholders under Thusla Doom. Injured due to the actions of King Kull of Volscia, a dying Varney was transformed into a vampire by sorcerers of the pre-cataclysmic Atlantis, because he was born in Atlantis. He allegedly was the last survivor among the vampires created in Atlantis before the Great Cataclysm, and ruled over Earth's vampires. But in 1459, tired of his ages-long existence, Varney chose Dracula as his successor and Lord of Earth's vampires, and imparted much of his supernatural power to him by forcing Dracula to drink his blood. Varney then committed suicide by exposing himself to direct sunlight. However, years later, Marie Laveau, desperate for vampire blood, had kidnapped Doctor Strange's friend Morgana Blessing and his brother Victor. Strange was about to deliver the spell page to Laveau when reason reasserted itself and he forever banished the page from Earth, basically. Laveau, possessing the Darkhold though, invoked a spell contained within for resurrecting the Lord of the Vampires. So yeah, the very first vampire of all time in the Marvel Universe, who killed himself with sunlight and then was resurrected, and also made Dracula, yeah, that's a number 1 for sure. There's no contest, even from the Alpha Vamp. No way.